Good morning. It is Monday, August 9th, 2021. Welcome to the workshop meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9:01 a.m. If you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to do roll call. We'll just do it individually. Commissioner Legree. Here. Commissioner Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Gay.
Here.
Commissioner Byrne.
Here.
Mayor Stan Mills. We have a quorum. Commissioner Srnowski indicated he would be late. And Commissioner Coluzzi is on vacation. Also up here with me today are City Manager Sharon Lynn and Glenn Mandalis, City Attorney. And joining us out front is Jean Lee, Kevin Williams, and Lynn Cohen. Thank you all for being here today. With that, I want to welcome all the watchers, those watching live or recorded. I also want to make note that there are no registered speakers today, correct? We did have one speaker that tried to register early this morning, and we just need to remind everybody that 24 hours notice is required. It's the instructions in the agenda. And the reason for that is because we have to generate an invitation that has to go out, and there's just not enough time to do that the morning of a meeting. With that, I wanted to recognize correspondence. It is, they are embedded in the agenda. There's one from Paul Carano having to do with yard waste, trash, and solid waste. There's also a letter, I believe, from the RBHA, Rehoboth Beach Homeowners Association, that is a poll that they conducted on their own, also in reference to the solid waste, yard waste, and trash-free recycle program. With that, we'll go next to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everyone. We have a new photo competition that the city is hosting. Hopefully this will be an annual event called Rehoboth Reflections. Will be open to the amateur and professional photographers. The competition offers an opportunity to share images that demonstrate the diversity, beauty, and vibrancy of our community for all seasons included. Winning submissions will be featured in the city's 2022 printed calendar, which will be mailing to all residences this year, and the submission deadline is September 14th. This is being sponsored and the idea of our communication specialist, so we look forward to seeing those photos. The annual street paving contract has been advertised. Pre-bid meeting is scheduled for this coming Thursday, August 12th, and the bid opening is scheduled for August 26th. Work on this will begin in the fall. The city has received a $14,000 rebate from DENREC for the 2 dual electric vehicle charging stations that were installed in the convention center parking lot earlier this season. Signage related to the EV parking spots will be installed over the next couple of weeks. And just an update on staffing. Many of our seasonal employees, cadets, and lifeguards will be returning to school over the next few weeks, placing even higher demands on staffing for the end of the season. Chief Banks and Captain Giles have plans in place for safeguarding the beaches and boardwalk with smaller staff. And the city has contracted with Tom West as the new city planner. He'll work a minimum of 12 hours a week, providing review and support to the Planning Commission and the Building and Licensing Department. Mr. West has over 30 years of planning experience, having worked in Pennsylvania and most recently in Lewis, Delaware. He has a master's degree from Westchester University in urban and regional planning. Included and embedded in the agenda is the budget for the detailing the first quarter of this fiscal year's revenues and expenses. General fund revenue is much better compared to last year's revenue due to last year COVID impacts, and the budget is in line to be on par with 2019 fiscal year revenues. Expenses are reported to be conservative as we continue with all staff being aware to be cautious as we get through the summer season. However, parking permit revenue at $970,495 as of close of business Saturday. We have passed 2020 totals by approximately $198,000, and we're currently about $30,000 from 2019 during the same time period. So that's looking good, and we have 6 weeks remaining until the end of the summer season. Parking meter revenue is on par with 2019, just a little behind 2019, and certainly much more than last year for the COVID responses. And that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions for the city manager? Yes, Sir Walter Brittingham.
Since we normally don't hear when we take new people on board or bring people, since we normally don't hear much about finance, the new planner, I can understand that, but how are they being remunerated, by the hour, or how's that working?
He's contracted for $90 an hour.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you, Sharon. If not, we'll move to the city solicitor's report. Glenn?
The only thing I wanted to quickly update people on, Mayor, is the Beach Walk litigation. About 2 weeks ago, the Court of Chancery held a trial where we took some testimony from witnesses. There will now be written submissions, and we're finally at what we think is the last stage of this litigation. So there'll be written submissions due in like a week, I think, and then it'll be fully submitted to the court, and we'll be ready for a decision from the court. So I think this is the last piece of Beach Walk ready for a decision. Other questions on that?
Well,
Any estimation time? Yeah.
And the time frame, I think, is sometime before the end. It's a big question mark, but sometime before the end of the year, possibly November, but most likely December, I would guess.
I think that's about right, Mayor. The court rules give the judges 90 days to decide a case once it's fully submitted. So probably 90 days from about a week from now would be the date.
Glenn,
Yes.
are any of the briefs public information where our people could go to the website and read those?
So the briefs are all public. They're not on our website. I can get them to you, or we can get them on the website. The last submissions are probably going to be the interesting ones. So why don't and when they're ready, I'll make sure you have them and we can post them. Sure.
Anything else? If not, we'll move on. The next item is committee reports. We've got two identified. Environment Committee, Commissioner Byrne.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Mayor. Very briefly, I reported last time that the Environment Committee was attempting to raise about $1,000 to cover the cost of printing about 2,500 table placards, which would go in restaurants and bars in the city to provide educational and somewhat entertaining information on the problems resulting from the use of single-use plastic products, and particularly focusing on straws. So the good news here is that the committee has raised just about $1,000 from some exterior sources, and the plan is to get these placards printed, and the final product and distribution is likely to happen possibly in September, but definitely in October. And I'll keep you updated, and I will bring samples as soon as we have those.
Thank you. Any questions? If not, we'll go on to the next committee, which is the Wilmington Baltimore Avenue Streetscape Task Force update. As you know, I chair that committee of a total of 16 citizens and restaurateurs and business people within the project area. We last met last October 4th, pretty much August 4th. We pretty much detailed individual opinions of Rossi's concept. Their first streetscape concept was based on task force guidelines. From there, Rossi will be preparing for a public workshop sometime in late September, date to be announced. Invitees to that public workshop will, of course, be the public, members, business members within that project area, task force members, but also the Board of Commissioners. We want you to come also so you can see what is being presented. At that point, we will solicit input from all those players at that public workshop. And after that point, largely the project will be handed over to the Board of Commissioners for review and discussion. Board of Commissioners will receive all the solicited input from the public workshop and any other letters that we get. And the commissioners will start debating the concept itself. They will take a look at the Rehoboth Beach Patrol and restroom building facility. Some are suggesting leave it in place and design it appropriately. Others are saying totally relocate the Beach Patrol restroom facility. That's at a grade level above our task force. That's more of a grade level for us, as are the final determination of undergrounding extent. Whether we abort undergrounding for whatever reason after we get information from the consultants, or whether we do full undergrounding or partial undergrounding, or even bury everything 100%, which is a step beyond the Rehoboth Avenue Streetscape, where it's undergrounded, but all the vaults or all the transformers are above the ground. And then parking's a big situation also. You know, the first proposal, a lot of parking succumbs to wider sidewalk. And so these are all things that the Board of Commissioners will need to evaluate based on whatever their own perspective is. Costs, funding availability, impacts to the community overall, impacts to the individual businesses, et cetera. So again, that's a date in late September that we're anticipating. It's just we have yet to formally announce that date. Are there any questions? If not, thank you very much. That's the end of that report. With that, we're going to go to old business. First item of old business is to discuss an amendment to Article 4, garbage and refuse collection. Fees for residential collection of the Municipal Code specify yard waste and recyclables in addition to solid waste and evaluate related fees. Probably will also merge into the second item of business, which is discuss proposed operational changes for solid and yard waste and recycling service, including in billings and collections. If you see in the support documents, there is a guide to help us along in the discussions that was authored by Gene Lee here. I want to thank you very much, Gene, for doing that. So maybe we will follow that guideline. But before I turn it over to Gene to help us through this, I would like to review something there. In our correspondence, our both bits of correspondence that we received today, there's questions about refuse, and in particular in the RBHA, they were questioning about the value of continued recycling. Is it really worth it? Is it time to sunset it, et cetera? What I'd like to do is share some information with you. Back in 2019, I did a presentation in front of this body. And that presentation was specifically to address the question, is recycling worth it? Are the recovered recyclables really recycled? And at that time, there were many articles on municipalities nationwide, especially out west, receiving recyclables, but were disposing of them in the landfills. And what I wanted to share with you in this presentation, and I'm going to reiterate very quickly today, is that we have two different situations. This recycling situation out west is different than what we have here. Back in 2019, aluminum and metal cans were the most valuable recyclable in Delaware. They move all over the country to the highest bidder, no problem moving them. In 2019, plastics, only number 1 and number 2. The recyclable plastics were 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, I believe. But only number 1 and 2, bottles and containers, had a positive market in 2019. They were sold and recycled in the U.S. to Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Nestle, buy a lot from Delaware, and other domestic buyers as well. Number 4 and 7, mixed bales of plastics, were going to largely in 2019 to Ohio to be recycled, but we had to pay, Delaware had to pay to move it up there. Currently, HDPE, which is number 2, milk jugs, is at an all-time high in value in Delaware. Not sure why, don't know how long it'll last, but yes, it's being recycled. Mixed paper cost Delaware to recycle back in 2019, and now we're getting about $33 per ton. It's being shipped largely to mills in southeast United States, mostly in Georgia. Glass back in 2019 had a negative value, being sent up to a company in Allentown, Pennsylvania to be washed and sold and sorted and made into more wine and beer bottles. Corrugated cardboard back in 2019 had a very low value, but it had positive value. And today the value is much, much higher. So it is being recycled. So overall, it's a negative market, but it's not as bad as before in Delaware. DSWA, Delaware Solid Waste Authority, was paying around $75 per ton in previous years, and now they're only paying about $40 a ton to get rid of it. So yeah, it's costly, but what I wanted to assure you then and now is that all the processed and recovered recyclables in Delaware are being sent out and recycled. And that's something that Delaware is very proud of, especially compared to the other municipalities out west that don't have the markets that we do. I want to let you know that contamination right now is about 16%. The goal for Delaware is to get it down to about 10%. So Delaware right now is recycling about 84,000 tons of single-stream recyclables a year. And so the answer from Delaware Solid Waste Authority is yes, absolutely, it is worth recycling and continuing that program. So I just wanted to share that as a little preface to it, and then we'll turn it over to Jean. Do you want to follow your guideline, or?
Well, the fees are really have to do with recycling. That's the only fee we're changing, and that's actually on the second page. So if we want to start with the fee, we'll start with recycling, which is line 70 on the second page.
Okay, and we've got line numbers on our guide.
Yes.
So if you want to reference any of those, Jean, we'd appreciate it.
Okay, so with recycling, currently it's free to residents. We pay Blue Hen per can per pickup. The rate went from $1.70 up to $3.20 over the last year. That's what kind of brought this up about fees. And the annual fee last year was approximately $112,000, and it's estimated to be about $216,000 this year. So that's our current situation. So with recycling, we have kind of two options to go here. We can keep, or actually we have about three options. We can keep the program optional, and we can not charge, just keep it just as is. And the city will absorb the price for the recycling. Or we can keep it optional. We can charge $135 a year, which is the average of the 6 years that we can have this contract for. We would issue and take away cans as residents ask. The one issue that we had talked about with that is if people start getting charged for it and it's not mandatory, people may just pull out of the recycling program, turn in their cans, and not want it. The other option is to make the program mandatory. We would issue cans to everyone that doesn't have one right now. We would charge $135 a year, and every trash customer would pay that price, and if they wanted more than one can, they would pay that price for however many cans they want. The one issue with that is then you may have people that are not using recycling that have to pay for it anyways. And also, there may be people that don't want that big can in their house, or they don't have somewhere to put it, and they're gonna have to deal with that. We have about 350 cans we would have to issue if we made it mandatory. And the other only change with that is, right now, the cans are free. We'll issue you as many cans as you want at no cost. We'll replace them as many times as you want at no cost. We would like to change that to you get the first can for free, but then after that, if you need replacements, then it would be $50 a can to cover the city's cost of the can for replacements. Do we want to do questions on each one of these things as we go to kind of keep it?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
if we can try to resolve each
Yeah.
one, I'd like to make a few notes. One is that as I walk around town, I see a lot of cans, waste cans, recycling cans, et cetera, around town that say property of Fairfax, Virginia. And I wonder in Fairfax, Virginia, how many say property of City of Rehoboth Beach, you know? So that's kind of, you know, giving out free containers, you know, where are they ending up is one question. The other thing I think that I have to do is try to keep in mind the fees that we're paying for this. The fees we're paying for collecting solid waste refuse. We're paying, of course, for the our labor, because we do the pickup. We pay for maintenance and purchase of vehicles and also the maintenance, so that's quite costly. And then we pay a tipping fee by tonnage of the refuse that we take to the landfill. On the recycling end, we don't have the labor, essentially. We instead subcontract Blue Hen, so we're paying Blue Hen. The good news is that there's no tipping fee. Are we still in that $0 tipping fee program with DSWA? So the more recycling we can collect over trash, the more we save, because again, tipping recycling is free and tipping refuse is not free. So I just wanted to share those things. Now, the yard waste is its own entity, and I think more like a refuse type of thing. Right? We pay our labor, we pay for our trucks and maintenance, and then we pay a tipping fee for yard waste also. That's not free. Thank you, Gene. So I'd open it up for the commissioners, I guess, to talk about the fee structure for recycling.
Okay. Can I go first?
Sure.
I got a couple of questions. First of all, you know, it's interesting when we talk, just as a point of clarification, we talk about making the program mandatory. It's the fee that would be mandatory, not the program. In other words, I haven't seen any proposal on the table to make recycling mandatory in the sense that there would be enforcement and cans would be checked to see if people actually recycle or not, correct? So it is just the fee that's mandatory,
And
not
we
the,
would give you a can for
not the action of recycling, which I think is an important distinction. But the other thing I noticed is that the annual fee, which went from 112 to 216, as I recall from your earlier slide, the revenue that we get from just waste for that people pay for is actually greater than our cost by about $32,000 was my recollection. So I'm assuming that $32,000 overage sort of offsets the annual fee that the city has been paying. So it offset the 112. It might also, to a lesser degree, but still offset the 216, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'm just putting that out there. Because the other thing I'm curious about, and we may not know this, but I'm looking at some of the operational efficiencies and changes, which I think are great. And what's really nice about it is it's based on that real data of the tonnage, you know. And so I think those are excellent suggestions. And I do wonder what kind of savings occur, and you may not know this today, but once we finalize this, I'm curious if that results in a savings of our expense for yard waste and for the change in pickup.
Well, and we'll be going back
Yeah,
to those.
okay,
We're
just
not skipping them. Yeah.
Right. No, I'm just throwing that out there. But that's all.
Anybody else?
Just currently, yeah, how many, we talk here about residents, the residents' voluntary basis. how many participants do we currently have in the recycling? Is that, just to remind me?
Currently, we have 1828 is the number of customers we have right now.
And then how many homes do we pick up refuse from?
So I know that we need to issue about 350 cans. Let me see, I think I have that on
Just
my trash.
2,100 something?
Yeah, because we don't do any commercial refuse, and some of the larger condos contract out to their own. So we have,
One-
we have 1,987 full-time resident customers and 782 seasonal customers.
Yeah, and that's what's confusing, because the adding those together is more than the 350 more than recycling.
Okay, so some of these are part of, so in here, this talks about 3 large condo units that are a problem.
Yeah.
Those have about 200 and some, maybe a little more than that, condos in there that are included in this trash customers. That we wouldn't issue every one of them a recycling container. We couldn't give.
Right. Okay.
So that's the difference in the number there.
Just to clarify, the 135 a year would stay constant for 6 years? It would not be increased?
Yes, so what we did was, it's a real 3-year contract, but we can extend it 3 more years. So I took the price of all 6 of those, so we didn't have to, okay, this is your price this year, and then we're gonna up it this much and this much. So it's an average of the 6 years, so that we could come up with one price for at least 6 years.
For 6 years? And I
Yes.
think that's an important message to
Yes,
folks, that this isn't going to be something that's going to increase every.
correct, correct.
On a parallel, would this statement be correct that we have refuse service for all residents or all homes in Rehoboth, correct? And we charge them either a seasonal or non-seasonal fee?
Correct. All individual homes we do. It's just some of the condos that have opted out of it because of their situation with trash cans and stuff.
But having a recycling bin is an option currently.
Yes,
So back to refuse, though, we charge them whether they use it or not. We just assume that they use it all the time, what have you, correct?
yes, they get charged that whether they use it or not.
So there's really no, I won't say enforcement, but way to verify that. Just if you are on the tax bill, you get charged.
Yes.
Okay.
Just an interesting comment that, while we say it's optional right now, it's not optional for the city to collect recycling, because the state mandates that if you collect trash, then you must also do recycling.
Yes.
On residential?
Patrick, pull your microphone a little closer.
I'm sorry, but that statement of mandatory collection, is that both commercial and residential?
So we do not collect commercial trash.
Correct.
They are obligated to get their own refuse and their own recycling. And I do not know the commercial side of it. So I just want to put that out there. So I wouldn't be able to answer any of the commercial questions.
I believe they are required.
I believe so too, but I don't know, so I don't want to.
Right.
Required, I'm sorry, refuse and recycling by the state or by the county?
By the state.
By the state.
They don't all do it, and that's.
Right, right.
So I'm hearing that all commercial customers are also recycling, or we don't know?
There's a state requirement for them to do so, but there are some examples that are not happening.
There's no enforcement?
There's no one, right, and because it's a state, it's not our law, it's a state law.
Okay, that's a fairly clear answer there. We don't know. Yeah.
Well, the state doesn't even know. The state
State
law
doesn't know.
says something like, all businesses and commercial enterprises must participate in a recycling program. What does that mean? That could mean just that your office is participating, not the rest of your entity. So there's no fine line there, but it's undefined, and that's a challenge for the state as well, because they don't have enough enforcement officers to offer that mechanism to everybody. But I think we need to focus on the residential part of it, I think.
Does Blue Hen weigh their recycling collection at Jones Crossing or wherever they're taking it? Do we know how many pounds they're collecting in Rehoboth?
Yes, so every month when we get our bill, we get their tipping tickets, and we actually do track that. I don't have it on me right now, but we can go back, I mean, we have a few years' worth of that data. We do collect that.
So if we wanted to know how many pounds of recycling we're collecting in the tourist season as opposed to how many pounds we're collecting in the non-tourist season, we could find those numbers.
Yes.
Okay.
Does that include the other municipalities that they also pick up?
No,
in the same
those are
truck?
our tipping, so that's what we get billed, well, we get billed per can, but those are our tipping fees for the trucks they used in our
Okay,
city.
because we're hearing from residents who are saying, hey, I don't recycle much at all. And then we're hearing from landlords who are saying, hey, I only recycle in the summertime. So it would be interesting to know just really how the numbers come down. And are we having any information coming back from Blue Hen? I know that the mayor said 13%, but how's the contamination problem coming? Are we getting feedback, or do we even know?
They have not let me know. I don't know if it's in our billing report or anything. That's something I would have to go look and see if they are tracking it to us at all.
Okay, because my information is totally anecdotal, but I see a lot of contamination in these blue and yellow cans.
Well, remember the number I gave you, 16%.
Oh, 16?
Is from the Delaware Solid Waste Authority, and that's an average for all of Delaware, where it's taken to a particular material recycling facility up in Wilmington. Maybe we can put together some of those figures on a little database, and at the same time, we can do the same thing for our solid waste tipping fees, so that we can see, because there ought to be a relationship there. And I know that for years I monitored it, and the solid waste tipping tonnage used to go down as the recycling used to go up. And it's not a one-to-one relationship necessarily, but because recycling is very lightweight. They got the weight of those plastic bottles and things like that. It certainly doesn't compare to the weight of what's in our solid waste and refuse thing. Does anybody want to make any recommendations on this?
I have one other question, if I may. Have we had discussions with Blue Hen specifically about if we add additional 350 customers, A, do they have the capacity to manage that? And B, would that affect the cost per unit, either up or down?
You already signed a contract, so that doesn't matter. They're not going to lower the rate once we already signed the contract.
Well, okay, that may be correct, but the capacity just to handle an additional 350 customers.
Well, I think that they would, based on whatever we decide, whatever the commissioners decide, because of that contract that we have. But no, there hasn't been a discussion.
Okay.
As I recall, the contract was only for 3 years, and it was renegotiable at the end of 3 years, and I'm assuming could be canceled by either Blue Hen or by the city. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Even though you even though you calculated the fees for the entire 6 years.
Yes.
And as I recall, there was a big jump in the first year. It was like 9% or something like that, and then it kind of leveled out and sloped down. But so it might just only be for 3 years, and it seems like our goal should be education, to really increase the tonnage of our recyclables. But that's just my opinion. Thank you, Mayor.
I agree with you. We need to do better on education. We originally designed refrigerator magnets, and we designed the decals that went on to the containers. Putting decals on the containers was always dangerous because as your type of recyclable changes, then you've got a whole nother decal to deal with, and it's hard to deal with that. But one of the things also is do we require mandatory, I'm trying to word it correctly, in that Delaware has proved that recycling is valuable and worthwhile. I think we should be promoting that through our program here. So we need to address, if we can try to advance this. What timelines are we on here, Gene, for all of this? Operational changes and stuff obviously have dates in here, and we would need to get them done by there. But as far as the fee schedule goes, what is our timeline to be able to resolve this?
Just changing the fee, I could do that up to probably 2 months before I actually bill for it. So I bill in June, so you've got till March of next year to really decide, because we can't charge them this fee until we bill again next year.
Okay, well, I prefer not to put this on the
Yeah.
next 10 workshops agendas if we can.
No, but Mayor, I would also caution that we want to get if we do want to educate, we need to get the information out as soon as possible. So, so just all residents are aware of any changes.
Well, I'm looking at education as what is and is not recyclable. What I'm hearing from you, in addition to that, we want to educate people of the changes in the fee structure. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Changes, yes, any changes that would be made should be made as soon as
yeah,
possible.
okay.
Mayor, just a comment
Yeah.
that kind of feeds into this a bit. The Environment Committee has been having some dialogue with Adam Schlachter at Democrat, who's an environmental program manager. And I was chatting with him recently about, what we're all looking at. And he's very interested and said that he would be more than happy once we put something into place to work with us, support us, because he's very interested in working at educating kind of the transient population, because that's where the biggest problem is across the state, in other words, renters. And so he has a keen interest in that and said that he'd be very happy to work with the city in a very supportive kind of way.
All right.
I think it'd be useful to have somebody like that to come in and present to us about the challenges are, what we need to do to educate. Because I do have the sense that the numbers, the percentage numbers may be different for coastal areas that they are for the state averages.
So one of the things, Gene, help us try to further this along. One of the things that I have had some neighbors that have rental units, and to keep things clean, so to speak, they got rid of their recycle bins. So so that's 2 houses I know that don't do any recycling whatsoever, and they happen to be big houses with, 6, 7 bedrooms. So they're missing out on that. So do we want to promote that and say you don't have to force your tenants to use it, but you're going to have at least one recycle bin on your property?
Well, I think the issue becomes who really is interested in recycling and who isn't, and what the convenience factor is, and how many people can really adhere. As much as we educate individual residents, if they don't want to do it, they're consistently not going to do that. There's no mandate for that.
However, if they're paying for it, that may be quite an incentive.
Incentive.
Well,
Yeah.
absolutely.
To figure it out. But, plus some education programs. And like Adam was telling me, I mean, there's just small things that you help landlords think about putting, a small recycling bin in the kitchen to make it easy for renters to do that, as opposed to just having one garbage can, for example. He said, and he's had experience on this, and a lot of it's common sense. However, again, he'd be very, very willing to work with us about some of the, in regard to some of this education.
And how much pushback do you think that we would get if we charge and people call and say, I don't recycle? I mean, we don't know the number there, but apparently from the complaints that we do get, we will have those that push back.
Well, you know, as taxpayers, we all pay for things that we don't necessarily use. The schools are a huge example of that. So it is for the greater good. It's not just for an individual household.
But a number of people also complain, and I, you know, we've met, talked about this, and I understand there may not be a solution, but the thing that I hear most often is equity, you know, and the fact that a small household pays the same as a large rental house. If somebody has a rental unit that they don't use, they're still paying double. I mean, there are a lot of issues like that, and I don't know what the solution is, but those are the types of complaints I hear more often than just, I don't want to recycle, but just, you know, why is this rental house that's a business, you know, paying the same thing as me, a small homeowner, is paying? I hear it all the time.
Yeah, but we're getting rental tax from that big rental house, which is a significant portion of our overall budget.
But that has nothing to do with the, that has nothing to do with the trash and the recycling. Well, then we should be using some of the rental tax for the city to still underwrite the recycling so that the homeowners are not paying more. I mean, in that case, if you want to say it that way, sure, why not?
I get similar requests from
Yeah.
voters
Yeah, I
to
mean, it's a tough issue.
correct that.
Yeah. And it was looked at, the last time changes were made in 2016, I think this issue was looked at, but it, you know, it really wasn't solved then either, so it's still out there.
Anything else to offer on this topic? I'd like to advance it a little more, but if not, then we'll move on to the next topic. Jean, go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna jump back to the beginning now because that still has a little bit to do with we're gonna go back to the refuse. And right there, starting off with how we bill refuse. So this isn't a change in fee, just a change in how we bill it. So right now, we bill quarterly. We would like to merge the trash and water and sewer all onto one bill. So we're sending out one bill instead of two separate billing cycles. It will completely eliminate an entire billing cycle that our guys up front have to process for payments because it will all come in on single payments. It'll eliminate us having to pay mail movers to send out an entire billing for trash. And it will be easier to make changes because right now I bill once a year. Everybody wants all their changes made right at exactly the same time before they pay that bill. And as houses get built and demolished, that does change whether or not they have to pay trash. So right now, if a house was built and completed tomorrow, if they don't call, I don't know about it until next year to bill them. If we build them on a quarterly cycle, it would be easier to keep up with changes with the trash. Not that that's a huge moneymaker, those small changes, but it would be much easier to maintain if we were billing it on a quarterly instead of an annual basis.
Can we have some discussion and perhaps even resolve this today? Anybody, any comments?
I think it makes very good sense.
I think it's a good change.
You bet.
There's a real efficiency for the city,
Right.
for the taxpayers, I think, cost savings. Yeah, I think it's an excellent plan.
Anybody else?
And we're going to talk about making a one-fee-fits-all situation as we go forward. Is that correct?
Isn't that in here, one fee?
So when you decide on a fee, it'll be a trash, yard waste, recycling fee. It'll be one fee for everything once you guys decide on what the fees are gonna be.
And that'll be the same for summer and no, I can't.
So it'll be different for year-round and residential because we still have those
Yeah.
difference in price there. But basically, it would just add any other fees into,
And as I
and it'd be
recall,
broken up into quarterly bills.
that number was insignificant. Was it like, how many thousand, $20,000 or something like that we would either gain or lose by combining those two for refuse?
So we wouldn't lose anything by combining.
Only if we didn't combine them. Is that what I think that's what you're saying.
I don't really understand.
Maybe my question's not right. Let's say how many are we missing? How many seasonal refuse fees are actually being paid by full-timers?
Yeah, that's-
Do we gain anything by combining, getting everybody on one?
having a flat fee, you're saying, and not a seasonal
Precisely.
versus, yeah.
How much do we gain or lose?
I have no idea.
Well, it's probably
I
about.
thought I heard those numbers.
Yeah, it's, if you take the number of seasonals and apply 25 extra
Yeah,
dollars
so it'd
to
be
it.
$25 times whatever that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was about 20,000, I think.
don't have
Yeah,
Yeah,
we got to combine these.
I
Yeah.
completely agree with that.
I do. Too. I mean, I don't understand. I understand the variance in seasonal, but $25 is not even.
Not even worth talking about.
I mean, that's
Right.
overhead. Mine,
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's down here on our
Okay, well, we can get to
guideline, I
that.
think. Back to number 1A, currently billed annually, changed to quarterly. If there's no objections, I'd like to direct the city manager to go ahead and make that change. Is that all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
When?
Now, this would take effect, though, when?
when?
Next year. So we've billed for this year. So next July would be a quarterly bill, and then it'd be quarterly every
So the
quarter
whole
after
program,
that.
whatever we earn out for the entire program starts next July, not January.
For the fee
the
stuff,
fee
yes.
parts of it,
All of that
okay.
would start next July.
Okay.
Because we've already billed out this year.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
Now, that is a code change, because it does say in our code specifically, we bill annually.
Okay.
So that is a code change that we'll need to do.
Okay, so we'll look into that. Very good. Next item, change end date of twice a week pickup. Go ahead, Nick.
Okay,
Reiterate that
so
change.
currently, we run twice a week, runs from mid-April through the end of November. We'd like to change that to end on October 31st. And the reason for that is our refuse average tonnage in October is still at 121. And then in November, it drops down to 69 tons. So doesn't really show that we warrant a second pickup through November.
This is an area where data is really helpful, isn't it?
You bet.
Yeah.
Fairly clear, as a matter of fact. We should do that.
Are we okay with changing the end date to October 31st?
I would be. My only question here is that we say in the presentation here, it says mid-April through October 31. Is there a reason we couldn't state, May 1st, so that it's a hard date, as opposed to then having to communicate what date in mid-April or what have you, just so that it's a hard date as opposed to.
May 1st through October 30th.
I'm just, to make it clearer and don't have to re-communicate each year as we do like with parking season and that type of thing. And then the same as the non-peak, going from November 1st through April 30th.
That's a good point. And this is another thing, though, where education is going to be, we need to be able to tell people some months ahead that this is happening and tell them several times that this is happening.
Yeah. But I think with a hard date is
Yep.
easier to communicate.
I would agree with that.
But I would support that change, certainly.
Maybe what we'll do, since the previous one has a code change, maybe we'll put all these in and then just go ahead and vote on them one at a time. So if we would make that, now there's no code change required for this one, I don't believe, Gene.
No, there's not a code change.
So we'll make, when we consider it, we'll make that change to May 1st through October 31st. Item number 2, bulk pickup currently is over a 2-week period during the last week of April, first week of May. Make the changes.
So Mayor, I would just offer, we had it in the middle of month, because what we typically do is run to the second Friday, which gives them the 2 weeks in the mid-April. as well as I think in May or whatever. But we can do, we would offer to do it the 15th rather than wait till the 1st of May, because we do see the spring stuff in April start to pick up. So I would still prefer that we do that if we could.
So on April 15th.
We could do 15th or say the second Friday, whatever we just.
Oh, okay, so rather than May 1st, okay.
All right, thank you, Kevin. So we'll verify the date if you like April 15 or whatever date is. And we'll put that on the next time that we consider the policy change. Any further discussion? We'll go to the next item, which is changing to the first 2 weeks of April. That's bulk pickup schedule. Go ahead, Jean.
Okay, so for this one, right now, we are running our bulk pickup the last week of April and the first week of May, one north side, one south side. We would like to change that to the first 2 weeks of April because we start the twice-a-week pickup the middle of April. This would put our bulk pickup before going twice a week, so we could use our employees better, get the bulk pickup done, and then transfer into our twice-a-week pickup. Some of the concerns that I had written down that we had before were that some of the homeowners in that are coming later in the spring, so more like the end of the April, beginning of May, to clean out the houses, get them ready to go using the bulk pickup. And then another thing that was brought up before when we talked about this is this last year we did a contracted service to do our bulk pickup instead of just the city employees doing it. So that contract, we used our truck, our driver, and then we had, or 2 trucks and 2 drivers from the city, and then we contracted 4 laborers to actually load the city truck, and they did it all in 1 week instead of 2 weeks. And the cost there, it was $15,214 for the contracted, and it's about $27,000 for us to do it over a 2-week period with our employees. So I just put that information in there because that had come up previously.
So the 15,000 was for 1 week, and the 27,000 is historically what we pay for the 2 weeks?
Yes.
Okay, so it actually would be presumably slightly more to do it for 2 weeks?
Us doing it, yes.
Well, no, so, with the contracted laborers.
No, so that 2 weeks is if we do it. It's 1 week if the contractor.
Oh, I see if they, okay, because I was just going to ask, can you do it in 2 weeks, do you think? I mean, in 1 week. Would you be able to do it in 1 week without having it 2?
We certainly did it in a week this time, so I think we can. I think it's better. I think it's better for the residents if we offer it over a 2-week period. They get a little more time. If they haven't come down yet, they're here.
Yeah.
It just gives them a little more time. And as long as it aligns with before we go to the twice-a-week pickup, you know, whether it's the first 2 weeks of April or the last 2 weeks of April, as long as it's before that twice-a-week pickup, it works very well with our staffing. So.
And what is if we do a special pickup, if you have, you know, large items or what have you, is there a fixed cost for that?
For the city's cost for doing the bulk pickup?
I mean, if you had a special pickup that you missed.
Oh, you mean if you didn't do so yes. So we charge to pick up bulk pickup $75 for your first item. And if you have multiple items, it's an additional $25 for each item.
Okay.
And we do that all throughout the year.
You get a lot of requests for that?
Yeah,
We d-
I had the same question.
We do get, I mean, I wouldn't say an overwhelming amount of requests, but we do get requests. I mean, we probably do 1 or 2 a month for
Yeah.
picking up mattresses and things like that.
Any other questions for Jean and this topic? If not, then we'll put that on for future consideration of the change as noted, proposed. With that, we'll go to the next item, which is standardized use of city refuse can. We're going to get to the public. Are you gentlemen here specifically for solid waste?
No, I'm here because I need to attend a community meeting for my merit badge for Boys Town.
Okay. Well, good. Welcome. Welcome. So, Jean, we'll go to standardized use of city refuse can. If you explain some of the options here and.
Okay, so This is a program that would, if we decide to do it, roll out over a couple of years. This is not an immediate change on this one. So we'd like to standardize use of a city-issued recycling can, and that would be the same can that we currently use for our valet customers. In requiring a city can, it would eliminate our trash guys having to pick up heavy cans or pull trash bags out of cans to get them light enough to dump them. We would be using this tip style can, and it would look nice. Everything out there would look nice. Some of the concerns that you guys had were that some property owners wouldn't be able to return their trash cans because they're leaving Sunday night and not going to be here Monday morning or Monday afternoon to put it back away. So they just put out bags right now. Some other concerns were the size of the can. If we just use one size can, would it be too big for some of our customers to put out and put back? So there was a thought in there that we would issue different size of cans. That's really all I got for that one.
Thank you, Jane. Last night, driving down Columbia Avenue, there was one single black trash bag on the side of the road. And so it proved one thing, that somebody would prefer to put out their trash in a bag and not the can. But it doesn't prove that whether they have gone home or not, they could still be there. Also proves that they violated our law that indicates that you can't put it out but the morning of. I was a big proponent of allowing the opportunity to put bags out the morning of, so that somebody leaving town would not have to be back around to put their trash can in. I still favor that. However, on my mind is that we do have valet service in town, and there's also another business in town that offers valet service. So they could be utilizing that. And the other thing that's even perhaps a bigger concern is the safety of our laborers, our personnel, picking up the bags, that the weight, these things get heavier and heavier, as well as the potential to get stabbed through the bag if there's a piece of metal in there or something like that. So, so I have mixed feelings, but I'd like for you all to share your thoughts, please.
Well, Stan, first of all, I'm glad to hear that you saw a black bag out, because what I often see, this morning I saw maybe a half a dozen of white bags out. And I know that that's against our current code, and I think part of the problem with going this direction, and I love the idea of the symmetry of the cans, but it's practically difficult, and it's also difficult to enforce. But I'm really glad to know that you can offer multiple sizes of cans. I think that got around some objections. But on the RBHA survey, I think as many as 30% said they sometimes use plastic bags in addition to their can, and 10% said they only use plastic. And I'm sure it's for that reason. They're not here to take a can back. I don't know how you, with the kind of population we have, I don't know how you solve that.
Review those percentages.
It was 30% used plastic and the can, so some of each, and 10% used only plastic bags. Yeah.
Could you remind me of our valet customers of the city that allows the individual to go onto the property, pick it up, take it out to the truck, and then return it to the same place on the property, or not?
So our valet service, we do not go behind any fences. We don't go into yards, anything like that. So those are pretty much all typically in their driveway up against their house, where they are. We go up, grab the can, dump it, put the can back. If they've blocked the can or anything like that, then it doesn't get emptied. So if they smash a bunch of cars in the driveway or something like that, we can't get to the can, then we can't empty it, and we don't pick up extra trash. Like, if they pile up bags, something like that, they need to take that out to the curb. It needs to be in the can, and we take it out and put it back.
And the charge for that service currently is,
So that's $300 a year for one can, and you can get up to 3 cans. It's $120 for each additional can.
I hear you say they only collect from the front. Do they go behind the house if it's not fenced and get the can, or only if it's in the
No,
front?
all of our customers, it's on the side of their
On the
house where
side,
their cans
okay.
are, yeah. And our streets department tells them where the can has to be.
Okay.
So if they take the can, put it somewhere else, then we don't, because we need to have somewhere that it's always in the same location. We don't have to go looking for the can, and it needs to be a safe location for our guys to go get it and bring it out.
And just to add to that, there is at least one private valet service.
There is one licensed
Operating,
company
yes.
in the city of Rehoboth that
And
offers the
and their
service.
guidelines, may well be different than the
Their
city.
guidelines are very different than ours.
Yeah.
And cheaper.
How,
Well,
any
they offer
num-
flexibility in that you can pick a menu of options, so that's,
any numbers?
Numbers on,
How many do we have? Any idea on how many the private vendors have?
I have no idea how many the private vendors have. Did I put it in this? The number of valet customers we have going into July 1st was just over 50. It was like 51, 52 customers. That's been going down every year.
Yeah.
We've had that service.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Are we going to resolve this today? Is there any further comment? We really haven't received definitive opinions on requiring the use of a city-owned refuse can.
Do we, Mr. Williams, what do you see in the future? Are we going to go with a tippable can with a driver, or are we always going to, any plans coming up the road? Because that would make a difference on what we're requiring now.
I certainly don't see that in our future.
Okay.
To have an automated truck that would have
Yeah.
just the driver and the arm. I don't think it's real conducive to the way we are set up here in Rehoboth, right? Too many cars, all those kind of things. Certainly the rear tip, what we have on our trucks now, having a can that you could put on that lift would be very helpful to the guys.
Yeah, and that would be much easier to achieve and go with. If you're going to use a can, use a tippable can.
Correct. That's what we're asking.
And no brown Lowe's cans like I have.
Well, we can dictate that even if it's private owned, it has to have a lifting mechanism capability.
Or purchase it from the city.
Well, the point I made before is I've already bought mine. I've got a brand new one. It's got a tipping mechanism and it's smaller and it fits the bill.
So did I.
And so I don't want to get rid of it and start over again and have to purchase a new one. That's all.
Yeah. And I'm one of the 30% that does both, and so I got to confess to bias.
I guess the other thing I wonder about with bags is looking down at some of your notes about the condos. So all these condos are using bags now.
So on the back page, the 3 large condos that I'm worried about
Yeah.
are the 3 large condos that don't contract outside of the city. So do you want to jump to those real quick, Mayor?
Well-
Because those concerns do have to do with this.
Yeah,
Okay,
that'd be fine.
so Edgewater House is the only one that I've actually talked to. I've talked to 2 different people there, and I got an email from one of them. They have 13 recycling containers for all of their property owners right now. They wouldn't want to up that number. Even if they were all paying for it, they would keep 13 recycling containers because that works for them, and that's what they have room to accommodate. On the flip side, if we required trash cans, they would not be able to accommodate that. They have a mechanical room that they keep all this in. They wouldn't be able to put trash cans in there as well. Right now, I guess they drop their trash in there, they bag it up, and they put it out when need be. My suggestion for large condo units is if we make these changes to mandatory recycling and the mandatory cans, is any large condo unit needs to get a contract outside of the city, just like commercial have to. Because Edgewater House is right around 50 condos. The other two are closer to 100 condos. So telling them they have to use 100 trash cans and 100 recycling bins now, we know that's not feasible. They are the only 3 large condo units in the city that still use city trash.
Gene, we used to use, Star of the Sea used to use city
Star of the Sea,
trash and recycling, I think. Are they, who are they
they do
using?
not use, so they are their very own situation. They are not even in here. They do not use city trash. They do not pay for city trash. Currently, they use recycling through Blue Hen that the city pays for at a completely different rate than what's on the contract. They are completely their own situation.
Well, let's explain to everybody, if their program's the same as it was years ago when I worked with them on it, it was that they have a roll-off container, the dumpster type that they fill with recyclables, and that's lifted overhead
So that's
by a
a
special truck. Are they,
completely separate contract with Blue Hen and Star of the Sea that the city pays for. It's 2 roll-off containers that they use.
yeah, okay. I have been inside Edgewater House. I've been over at Mariners Court, 1 Virginia. I see what they do. Edgewater House, situation similar to Star of the Sea, actually, where they have an elevator shaft that goes up to each floor, and at each floor level, they have a little room, by my recollection, is 4 foot by 4 foot. It's a teeny little thing, and that's where they keep their trash and I guess maybe they take recycles down to the basement now, but trash is in that upper room. They have absolutely almost no space beyond storage for bicycles, et cetera. So I think it would be a burden if they had to put any more cans out, you know, if we said no bags. So I think it may be the better program to require them, that if you require them, then how do we treat Star of the Sea?
Well, Star of the Sea is in my list of, so if we make this recycling mandatory, we have a few people that are not paying for trash that are paying, or that are using our recycling program. I would take all of those cans back because they wouldn't be paying for it and they don't use our trash services. They're just using the recycling because we offer that to everyone. They would need to contract with Blue Hen for themselves instead of the city paying for it.
Gene, I don't see it in this presentation, but I think in the last one, you gave a cost on how much it would be to provide city cans to everyone in the initial implementation. Well, my recollection was it was 230,000.
Somewhere right around,
Line 88 or,
Yeah, but the total.
let's see. Yeah, I don't,
It's on the June presentation, not the July one. The June 7th one.
Well, I think it was in the low to mid 200,000. I'm inclined to provide or have requirements such as it be a tipping mechanism, but at this point in time, I don't know that I think it's worthwhile to have a standardized can citywide. It would look nice, but as you stated, Mayor, a lot of people just purchase cans. They have smaller cans that accommodate their household. I'm not sure that having a standardized mandatory city can makes sense.
okay, let me hear you clearly. You're willing to mandate lifting mechanisms on trash cans. They need to be
Yeah,
private, but additionally, you would be getting rid of the opportunity to just put things out in bags? or is that,
No, I didn't mention anything about bags. I think the question here was having a mandatory citywide can.
yeah, but my recollection is mandatory, meaning you must use that to put your trash in, no more bags. So it is, to me, it is an integral question there. Is that right, Gene?
Yes, so the part of the going with the standard can was to eliminate the bags just sitting on the
Yeah.
side of the road as well.
So we need a response to that as well.
I'm indifferent on that
Yeah,
topic.
so issuing a trash can to every customer was $152,295.
Did you say that there were different sizes available of the standardized can that could be used for us in Rehoboth?
I mean, I'm sure we can order different size cans. We'd have to decide what we want, if we want to issue different size. Right now, if the only can we issue is valet, and that is one size.
Okay.
So, just to clarify, a question for Kevin.
Yeah.
Are you recommending that we go with standard issue? And then, if so, does it make sense to have a couple of options for sizes?
Thanks, Commissioner. Yes, we don't really have an opinion if you use a 50-gallon can and a 25-gallon can. That's fine, as long as you can get on the ramp and flip with the tipping mechanism. Whether it has a city logo on it or not, we're probably indifferent to. Obviously, it would look better if it does, so, in that perspective, yes. And maybe we would then have some on hand for when new residents come in, they want to purchase one from us instead of going to Lowe's. We'd certainly have those available for them.
And you are recommending?
So yes, on
this
multiple
direct-
sizes, we would like them all to be tippable. And the logo, we'd have it as an option if they wanted to purchase one, or if they got a new one like the mayor and doesn't want to buy another one, then we would be okay with that as well.
Cheap, he's cheap.
Frugal.
Would the possibility of this sort of an option for a phase-in program that we dictate, if you will, that it has to be a tippable can of your own, but as new customers come along, that they are then required to buy a city can, either size, so that eventually, we'll get into a position where this will be in place. I don't know how logistically manageable that would be, if it'd be more cumbersome, but it would seem to be a way to introduce this in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years or what have you.
I mean, we have city cans,
Right.
for the valet service, so we have some in stock. I'm sure Mike could order some, and we do have people call and say, I'm new to Rehoboth, I need to get a trash can, and we say, we don't issue trash cans, you have to go purchase them, Home Depot, Lowe's, somewhere like that. I think that, that to me seems feasible that we could, because just like recycling bins, we issue them out, just have them in stock.
And we
keep
issue
people
yard
coming
waste
in.
containers. So, to keep it a consistent way we do business, if you will.
But not do it all at once at $150,000.
Right, so that we could phase this in, and that new arrivals or new residents in the city, this is the way we do it. They don't know any different from previous. Again, it would be a 3, 5, 10-year program, but that would be the goal, to complete it in that period of time. And we'd have eventually have a standardized way of looking and tipping and what have you, and also it wouldn't have to be a one-time such an outlay of cash for the city. I would just think that would be a possibility to consider going forward.
Come and get a can, we'll put it on your next bill.
Right. This is the way we do it.
That's doable, if that's,
Yeah, that could make very good sense. I would add that those of us that are here that would want to opt into that immediately, then also
We
have
wouldn't
that
say no,
option.
certainly.
Right.
But we issue yard waste cans, we issue the recycling cans, so it would seem, again, to keep it consistent in an operational way.
So are we leaving alone the opportunity to put individual bags out?
I don't think so, are we? We
That's
still
the,
put,
that's the question. I don't know that we've addressed it, Are we making everybody use cans only? That
I think
we
there
can't
were-
put bag trash out anymore, period.
I think there were 30% who did both. Is that
And
Wouldn't
there
that
are
be-
10% that only use plastic, and they're probably the ones that are never here on,
Yeah.
pickup days or something.
Yeah, I personally didn't connect the fact of city-issued cans, meaning no bags on the streets.
I did not.
I think that comes back to an issue of enforcement, and that's a whole nother subject to get into in this regard, but people are going to use those plastic bags no matter what. Whether we have the rules or not, we see that currently, if you've noticed yourself, they put them out on Sunday night as opposed to Monday morning. In going down to Rise Up Coffee in the morning on Monday mornings, notice quite a few out-of-town cars stopping at Grove Park and dumping their trash in the big bellies there on their way out of town, back to wherever they're going. So I think it's an enforcement issue or an education issue, but just going back of trying to get consistency and tipping containers, whether they have the city seal on or not, but going forward, we would implement this over the years, and again, not such a heavy cash outlay.
But again, the way I see this is integral with the conversation of requiring trash cans to have lifting mechanism
Correct.
capability, is that using cans would eliminate staff from lifting heavy cans to dump into the truck.
Right.
And I thought it was applicable to bags also, so. So what I'm hearing though is let's leave the bags alone for now, but step into a program of requiring lift mechanism capable trash cans and the ability to buy for the city to provide them.
Is there not a current rule on the books about the bags?
Yeah, they have
Oh, yeah, there is, there
Yeah.
is. But again, it's a matter of, do we want to save the backs of some of our employees from having to lift those things?
Right.
You know, you
Oh, I
go out
understand
there
that.
and you find 6 bags filled to the brim with liquids, and any landlords here or ex-landlords here clean out a refrigerator on a Saturday with 100 pounds worth of food and put it in a bag, try lifting that. I mean,
Then you go to
Full
the
agreement
can.
that that's,
yeah,
that-
I mean,
that's a concern for
so,
our employees.
Question on that. Gene, I understand that when Blue Hen picks up, if there are recyclables laying around the can or what have you, they're theoretically not supposed to pick them up, but they do indeed pick them up, but they alert you to the situation?
Yes.
Okay. And then what happens from there? Is this homeowner charged anything, or just you write it down on the naughty
No, it
list?
just
or-
kind of goes in our notes of,
Got it.
there have been a couple enforcement things where we found a business owner was actually bringing recyclables to their house and not, those kind of things we've dealt with, but not on, if somebody just puts out boxes and they
Okay.
do it, as long as Blue Hen's still picking it up, they're still picking it up.
How long is that going to go forward? Any idea? For Blue Hen has to put another person in the truck.
Are they gonna keep doing that?
Those aren't
Have
questions
been.
I can answer. I don't know what Blue Hen will or will not continue to do. I think they have different drivers do different things. So that's not something I can speak to.
And Blue Hen doesn't, their staff doesn't get out of the truck.
I have photographs.
Yeah, yeah.
They do on they have. I wish they wouldn't. I'll send you the photographs.
Well, for this topic, we'll write up something, what we believe is the summary of this.
Yep, yep,
so
I've
we-
been
So
taking
we can
notes
bring
so
that in
that-
front of us again. It looks like,
Mayor, if I could just ask, Kevin, is it a problem for the city guys to pick up the bags? Is it becoming a problem that's increasing?
Thanks, Commissioner. It is a problem. Obviously, a lot of our guys aren't the youngest guys in the crowd, right? And they're going around trying to lift those bags. Whether it's a can you can't tip, they have to reach in and pull the bags out of, is tough for them. Obviously, it'd be tough for anybody. The bags rip because they're so heavy. So I would kind of separate it in that the typical cans is great, and we really advocate for that. But we also advocate for not leaving the bags out, because you got the heavy bags on the ground. You have the birds and foxes and deer and everything else getting in them. But more for our guys is they're still hard to pick up for them. They've got to pick those up, get them to the truck, and put them in the truck. So I could separate it that way, but I like both.
Yeah, I believe our current law is successful, giving the opportunity to put out the bags, but it can only be the morning of. And I've seen very little animals break into bags when they follow that program. The problem,
there's
the
supposed to be
problem
black
is,
bags.
yeah, I don't know that the color makes any difference, but in terms of rodents getting into them.
Yeah.
But especially if they're put out the morning of, it's when they're put out the night before and they're out for 12 hours that I see the biggest problems. But there's also size limits or weight limits on the bags. They can only be, they need to be under 40-some pounds or whatever it is. The problem is if it's 80 pounds, what are you going to do? Penalize, put a note on there? It's very hard to deal with. So, we'll come back to this. And I think we have one more topic, Jean, yard waste, I believe, is the last one.
Yes.
Lines 51 on.
Okay, so currently, yard waste is picked up the first, third, and fifth Wednesday of the month. We'd like to change that to every other Wednesday, just to fit in our schedule better and keep it more consistent. As well as we'd like to change the loose leaf pickup. Currently, we offer that from October 1st through mid-May. And that is offered by street, by day of the week, but all 5 days of the week. So there's a handful of streets, Monday, handful Tuesday, and they go around every single day of the week. We'd like to change that to, let's see, to start November 1st. And then to go through specifically the second Friday in May, because there's always confusion on the last day, and then people put yard waste out that weekend, and they end up going back and vacuuming up stuff after it's already ended. So specifically November 1st through the second Friday in May. The reason for the changing it to November 1st is in October, they're still only using about 35 tons. Where in November, it jumps up to 96 tons. And so November is our big month where we change how much we're actually collecting. And then instead of doing the 5 days a week, just do it 2 days a week. One side will be south side and one day will be north side. And those would actually coordinate with when the second trash day stops. That second trash day then becomes your loose leaf pickup day. So if you're Monday and Thursday for trash during the summer, then you'd be Monday and Thursday Thursday would be your loose leaf pickup. So it would give them a more consistent schedule, and it would eliminate how many days of the week we got to run the vacuum truck and still be able to pick up all of that loose leaves that are out there.
I think this is probably a good program. I could support it, provided there's a commitment to picking up everything there is in those 2 days. In other words, if we're just absolutely overwhelmed, what do we do if we can't finish by 5 p.m.? I mean, do they keep on working? We allow them to go overtime? Do they come back the next day? Because I wouldn't want them to have to wait a whole week to go back there. I think there needs to be some kind of commitment, so.
Sure, Mayor, thank you. And typically what we would do is then follow on the following day. If we didn't get to them, we'd circle back another day and go get them. And they have that same situation now if we're only doing half a dozen streets on any given day. They wait another week until we come back and hit those streets.
Right. I mean, I've got some neighbors next to me that have literally 150 feet of leaves to clean up. I don't know if that fills up the truck in one shot, but as long as there's a commitment to cleaning it up that particular week and not deferring another week so that we don't have to go through a weekend with all the debris out there, I would be happy with that. Any feedback from the commissioners?
I think it's wise to move in this direction.
All righty. Gene, I'll work with you and Sharon on a write-up of I think we might have missed one or two little things here, but we can do a
There's
write-up.
one more thing with yard waste.
Yes, ma'am.
there is a fee change here. Currently, we only charge $35 for the can.
Line number,
That's line number 66. We would like to change that fee to $50 because that's what it costs the city now to purchase those cans is just over $50. It's like 51 something. So we'd like to up that fee just to make it more in line with what we're actually paying for that can.
is that something that we need to codify, or is that just a policy?
That is not in the code.
That's just a policy, okay? Because I would feel comfortable just saying at cost, so that if it goes up over the years, we're covered.
Okay.
Any feedback on that?
That makes sense.
If not, thank you, Gene, very much. Any further questions?
Well, the only thing is, we're talking about a write-up, and again, I don't know whether this would be for the next discussion but I'd love to see a sort of an overall picture accounting of the savings from the operational changes, the elimination of the 152,000 if we're not buying everybody a container, and just to see what the mix of that looks like, so we can see what the actual additional cost of the recycling program is.
We could put that
Yeah,
together.
okay, that'd be great.
Thank you very much. Now, any members of the public like to talk about the trash issue? Trash, solid waste, recycling? You're okay, Walter. Thank you. I see
Thank you,
nobody
Gene. I know
else.
you spent a
You
lot of
gentlemen,
time.
you want to say anything? No? Very good. Thank you again, Gene. Thank you, Kevin, for participating with this. Gene, I'm impressed with what you did on the guidelines in your presentation. Thank you very much. With that, we're going to go to the next item of old business. And we've got a long agenda here. I'm trying to get it all in today. We may have to abort early, but otherwise I'm intending to get through it all. So bear with me. Next item of old business is report on status of proposals by Verizon and to install wireless antennas along the boardwalk, including status of hiring an outside wireless consultant. As far as the status of the Verizon's program, if you may recollect, they have made a proposal for installation of wireless antennas on the east side of the boardwalk as well as the west side of the boardwalk. They are on hold until we get a wireless consultant on board. So that's that. In terms of hiring a wireless, can you save my voice and give us a status report on that, please?
Certainly, Mayor. We have proposals right now from two entities that we spoke to, VCOM and also Crystal, what are they called?
CTC, VCOM,
And
Columbia.
So it's Columbia and CTC
CTC.
net so far, is that correct?
CTC and Columbia.
Max's. And a fourth one. What's their name? Crown Castle.
Thank
There
you,
you
thank
go.
you, thank you. And we just recently, middle of last week, received one from CTC that we'll be reviewing early this week and make a recommendation to the commissioners.
Are these boardwalk, where are they? Where? Are they these boardwalk ones?
This is a wireless consultant for the boardwalk and actually.
Oh, this is the
throughout
consultant,
the
okay,
city.
sorry.
For the
okay,
whole,
all right.
for the whole town,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
essentially.
yeah,
The
consultant.
first
Okay, I
focus
thought
would
you were
be
talking
the boardwalk, but
Yes.
they'd be available for the full town. So we'll keep you posted on that. Let's see, we'll go to the first. Any comment on that? Nope. With that, we'll go to new business, discuss nomination of Joseph Vescio to fill a vacant seat on the Environment Committee. Commissioner Byrne?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I intend to nominate Joe Vescio at our next commissioners' meeting. So I would like to have that on the agenda. Joe has owned property in the area for 12 years. He's lived here full-time for 1 year. He applied in early May for the committee. He has a degree in environmental science and geology. He's a professional licensed geologist. He has 38 years' experience of working in the environmental field. He just retired last week from the United States Environmental Protection Agency. So I think he would bring some excellent expertise and experience and perspective to the work of the Environment Committee.
Very good. We'll put him on the August regular meeting for consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from our comments?
What did he do at EPA?
His experience is in the area of water, wastewater issues, hazardous waste, Superfund sites, and related environmental issues, he tells me.
I'll vote now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, let's
Dick, would he
grab
be
him, right.
a voting or non-voting member?
He will be a non-voting member. He lives just outside the city on Holland Glade Road.
Thank you.
Very good. Any members of the public want to say anything? Walter? Nope. Very good. Next item of new business, report on hiring of a city planner. City Manager Sharon Lynn gave that report earlier. And a report on the hiring of an attorney dedicated to the Planning Commission. I've directed the city manager to work with myself and Glenn on hiring a new attorney dedicated to the Planning Commission. We're at a point, I think, where Glenn is, his responsibilities are growing. Thank you, gentlemen. His responsibilities are growing, and I think the timing is right for the hiring of a dedicated attorney to the Planning Commission. We'll keep you posted. We don't have any progress to report right at this point, but we will certainly keep you apprised. Any comments? Public? If not, we'll go to the next item of new business, and that is item C, discussing an ordinance to amend Chapter 270 zoning, Sections 270-4 and 270-46.1 to repeal certain provisions of Chapter 270, establishing administrative lot mergers and separations. The support document is in your embedded in the agenda. This is certainly something somewhat new to us, and that we don't often repeal something within the zoning code. So Glenn, if you could give us background information, if you would, that helps the layperson understand why we're actually trying to erase an ordinance.
Sure, Mayor. So this really grew out of, it was probably a decade ago that we realized that the city had some provisions on the books that would allow people who had lots in common ownership, so adjacent lots in common ownership, the city would allow them to use those two separate lots as one lot for zoning purposes, and you could build a structure across the building or the property line that those two lots shared. So it wouldn't require any special subdivision or any lot merger or anything like that that would be recorded at Sussex County. So we realized that this was happening. The code allowed for it, but unfortunately, there is no tracking mechanism within the city or within Sussex County when these mergers and consolidations were happening. The idea was that people could consolidate their lots for zoning, build a home across the line if they wanted to, the property line. Then if years later they decided to remove that structure, those two lots would still be separate. They could sell them as separate lots, and there'd be no need for any documentation. We realized that that wasn't working. Not documenting it wasn't working. So about a decade ago, this ordinance was adopted that allowed that process to continue of merging lots for zoning purposes and then unmerging them if you remove the structure. And we implemented this ordinance so that there would be a tracking mechanism, at least within the city, to realize when people were using their lots, their two lots, as one lot for building purposes. What happened over time is that the process that we implemented that was really intended to help us track what was going on with these lots, it kind of created a new problem that we didn't anticipate. And we learned of this new problem as we've been going through the Planning Commission CDP process, because for the first time, the state is requiring that all the maps within the comprehensive development plan be at the parcel level. So every map that we show in the comp plan, it can't just be a general area of here's zoning or a general area of here's an intended use. It has to be down to each individual parcel. So as we started looking at it, we realized that what was happening is, although the city was consolidating or separating lots for zoning purposes and tracking it within the city, always intending for those lots to remain two separate lots should the structure be removed. What would happen is the individual owners would go and record the city's approval of this consolidation of lots. They'd record it in Sussex County as an actual consolidation of the lots. So that now Sussex County would issue only a single tax parcel ID number for those two lots, whereas the city still saw it as two separate lots. So then we realized that our records are becoming a little bit sideways and inconsistent with Sussex County. So the result of this ordinance would be, if adopted, there'd be no more administrative mergers or separations of lots. Every time an individual wanted to consolidate their two lots that they owned adjacently, or if they wanted to take those two lots apart again, it would require an actual partitioning action by the Planning Commission in the city. There'd be no more administrative mergers or deconsolidations. That would require a little more work on behalf of the Planning Commission. I would say we get 3 to 5. You know, it varies from year to year, but there are a handful of them every year. So I mean, other than that, I mean, I think the intentions of this ordinance were really good, and it's unfortunate because we spent a lot of time a decade ago trying to work something that would, you know, manage the process, and it just didn't have all the intended consequences. It had some good outcomes, but it just didn't function as we intended it to, I think.
I'm glad to hear there's some positive intent there, because I was one of the sponsors of this that I thought was a good idea, and helped relieve some of the burden of the Planning Commission at that time too, actually. So just help reiterate here, is there no fix for maintaining this?
Well, I think the issue that we're running into is, and it's one that I think what happened is there's a misunderstanding of what a merger or consolidation for zoning purposes is versus a merger or consolidation for all purposes. So the city was saying, we're going to still consider these as two separate lots, and we're going to put them together. You can use them for zoning. That is, when I say use it for zoning purposes, that means now instead of having two squares put together, you end up with one rectangle maybe, and the setbacks are now established from those 4 lines, and it's as if this line in between the lots doesn't exist for zoning purposes. However, the city also recognizes those as two separate lots, would keep them with two separate tax parcel numbers, two separate tracking numbers within our own system. But the county, not many municipalities do a merger or consolidation for zoning purposes. You're either merging the lots or not, and it's for all purposes. So, and I think that's where we got sideways with Sussex County's records, because it's just not something that Sussex County typically sees. And if there's a document from the city, stamped approved, you know, they don't look beyond lot separation or lot merger. They don't consider whether it's for zoning purposes or not. So is there a way to fix it? Only, I think, if Sussex County was willing to really become knowledgeable and aware of our process and understand that, you know, if they see something that comes in from the city of Rehoboth Beach, they have to take a moment and say, is this an actual action by the Planning Commission that is either creating a new property line or erasing a property line, or is it an administrative approval for zoning purposes only?
Wouldn't it be an easy fix to just have a stamp that we put on those approvals that say for zoning purposes only, not an actual merger or consolidation? Something that when someone goes to record them in Sussex County, it's clear that.
Perhaps. I mean, Matt, I know we have a stamp that says for zoning purposes only. When we do a plan review, sometimes we stamp it for zoning purposes only, for the purposes of telling the world that we're not approving everything on this. We've looked at it from a zoning perspective only.
Yeah, that's correct. We do have a stamp that we use currently. We use that a lot more for real estate agents who come in and want to know like a zoning designation for that particular lot. We stamp off on a survey like that, but not in the case of a merger particularly.
Is Max Hamby? Max Hamby's the one that would really be able to answer that question better, because I know he's has talked a lot with Sussex County about their records and our records, and whether something like that would be I just don't know whether Sussex County would say, yep, perfect, let's go with it, or whether, that wouldn't be a fix for them.
So
I mean, it's a
wh-
question we
what's-
can explore. I don't think there's any real urgency to get this adopted.
No.
What's
We're-
the
we're not-
downside to the property owner? They have to pay $1,000 to go before the planning commission to have it.
Right, generally, the idea behind an administrative merger was, it would not require the level of rigor that it takes to go through a planning commission partitioning, which is, you show up for one meet, you pay a fee, which I think is $1,000, might be $1,500. You pay a fee, you show up for the first monthly meeting where there's a consideration of a preliminary review to see if the application's in order and ready to go to public hearing. Then the city publishes notice of it, sends out notice to the neighbors, and then you have to, come back the next month for a public hearing. And usually the planning commission will decide it on a simple partitioning that second month. Sometimes it'll go to a third month if some issue is identified. Whereas an administrative merger or separation, it's a request filed by a letter to the city manager. The city manager, using staff, looks at it to see if this is a candidate for administrative merger or separation, and that's all laid out in the code. And if it is, I create a 1.5-page document kind of giving the tax parcel numbers, what the intent is. The owners sign it, the city manager signs it, and the lots are effectively either merged or separated for zoning purposes.
I would love to resolve this and figure a way to keep it.
Yeah, I would like there to be an
Honestly, but I
administrative
felt
fix.
that I needed to at least put it in front of everybody with what the possibilities are. And that's why I'm seeking everybody's feedback on repealing it, going back to the drawing board and see if there's, what mechanisms, if any, can we put into place? Nothing against the county, but to ask them to do too much would be a challenge and perhaps not a good thing for us to do, to have them change their process. They're dealing with many other municipalities, and if each one has their own program, then it gets to be a
Glenn,
challenge.
is it a problem that, so you're saying basically they're taxed in two different ways? They're taxed as two parcels here, but as one parcel for the county?
Right,
So
can
is it better to not have that be the case?
Well, I mean, I tend to agree with the mayor in that if there's a way that we can do it administratively and do it right, there's some benefit to the property owner to do it that way. But as things have evolved now, yeah, obviously you don't want the county taxing one way and the city
Right.
taxing a different way, and our records being separate. And we've noticed it now through the CDP process that, it's identified some real inconsistencies between Sussex County's records and our records. So I don't know what a perfect answer is. If you would like us to explore with Sussex County and city staff whether there's another option to be able to keep it on the books, we can do that. Max isn't here to speak for himself. I think I can represent that he's really concerned that we have this process and thinks it creates problems with Sussex County. So
Is this a unique process to this municipality alone within Delaware?
it's a unique process to municipalities that I work with. I don't know of another municipality that I'm involved with regularly that has an administrative merger and separation.
And just, I've been on the planning commission, and Commissioner Gay, you may comment on this also if I'm thinking through this, but during a partitioning, the planning commission members also look at the frontage of the lot, the availability of fitting the 4,000 square foot triangle within a buildable lot. I know in 2007, when this originally came up, the issue was rear lot lines and consistency in rear lot lines. So there are a lot of other things that go into a partitioning other than just saying, yeah, it's 5,000. It was 10,000, we're going to make it into 2 5s. So I don't disagree that an administrative opportunity makes it quick and easy, if you will, but there are a lot of check boxes that a partitioning, the planning commission goes through that not necessarily others would go through on an administrative what have you. That is my concern, is that, again, if it's unique to us, And going back and looking through the minutes also, it talks about here, the commissioners developed 3 affidavits, one for consolidation of lots for recordation of Sussex County, one for separation of lots for recordation of Sussex, separation of lots of recordation for Sussex County, and one for separation of lots for internal use only. In a recent issue that we've seen, I only saw 1 affidavit. The other 2, I don't know were part of the recordation process or not, but it seems like initially in 2015, that process was established for verifying to Sussex County. I don't know if it's been followed. So again, there's just, and again, there are more hoops to jump through when you go through a petitioning with the Planning Commission, but I think those are necessary hoops as more and more developers become creative in how we're doing what we're doing in the city. So I just think that, you know, that a process that has been in place, we should take a deeper look at that, of why it is and what is benefiting. And also, going back to your draft document here, with regards to definition of lots, I also wonder if we should also include here somehow a county parcel ID number in our definition of lots. We certainly use that as reference, and that's what realtors use and the banks use and all of this, but we do not currently reference that. We only talk about such lots usually be identified by a block number or street and a lot number. We make no mention of county parcel ID numbers. So again, if we're looking at this, that may be an area to add that into the definition of lot, just for your, if you could look into that to see if that would be more applicable, because that is a common denominator that everybody uses, as opposed to just, I know there's, as we found in the CDP, there's been some issues of lot and block versus parcel ID numbers and how it's described and what have you. So again, just something to look at as we're looking at this whole package.
Yeah, so on that last point, if I could, on that last point first, I think the reason that the city has been a little bit reluctant to adopt a straight tax parcel ID number, that is a little bit reluctant to rely entirely upon Sussex County's records, or that there were a lot of things that were recorded through the years that the city didn't approve or doesn't recognize.
Correct.
That to do a wholesale adoption of whatever Sussex County has could, I think, create some incredible issues for the city. And I'll just share that there are...
No, I understand that, but I think that moving forward, you know, there certainly is, as was discovered in the development of the CDP, those issues exist. Right. But how to correct those going forward so we just don't keep making the same mistakes again, right, or the same process is if there's an answer, maybe we should be trying to think that through, again, not immediately, but of how to manage this for the future.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that when I said that we are unique, we're unique in that we had a process that dealt with consolidations or separations for zoning purposes.
Correct.
There are municipalities that have administrative processes for minor lot line changes and things like that that don't require planning commission review. So we're also unique in that we don't allow any minor adjustments to be done by city staff. So unless it's for zoning purposes only. Yeah. And then I guess finally, the way these code provisions were established was they were established hoping to be able to take all those things into account that include the 4,000 square foot rectangle and all, because the only situation in which this applies is when there are lots that the owner is trying to put back the way they were originally plotted. So you can't do any new creation of a lot. I mean, it has to have been originally plotted the way that the owner wants to now recreate it. So it was intended to be a very limited circumstance where we're not creating a new triangle-sized lot, or it was really the way that it was plotted previously. So I don't know what a perfect answer is.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's exactly a very important point on it. That the majority voted and supported it, taking it out of the hands of the Planning Commission, but only in limited circumstances, again, where it reverted back to the original lot size and dimensions, et cetera. So, I mean, this certainly, this many years later, gives us the opportunity to talk about whether we want to hand it back to the planning commission or not. But I guess I would rather prefer that we take one last stab at trying to leave it alone, but wanted to get, there's no rush for this, for one thing. Remember, it's in the zoning code, so it has to be talked by us. It has to, we have to have a resolution that we adopt to go to public hearing, then we have to conduct the public hearing. But again, there's no critical timeline for this to happen. So if we ask for a report at the October workshop on any additional thoughts from the IT department and your department on how to make this work and what the challenges are, that we can take it up again at our October workshop. Is that enough time for you all?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Does everybody, what's everybody's preference?
I'd like to see an administrative fix.
So you'd like to do that program then, okay. Anybody else?
I think if an administrative fix is possible, and it makes it, if you will, easier, but I'd also like to see a written policy or process of those checkboxes that have to be reviewed by the building inspector, as opposed to just, well, yeah, this looks good to me kind of thing.
We actually have that right in. We have a checklist that you created a while back. No, I thought I've seen a document where you laid out a whole, here's the process to go through an administrative. Right.
Okay, sounds like we will.
I think that would be, yeah.
But I think, again, so that it's not interpreted, so there's a place to start from where the interpretation and how it goes, specifically those issues that are brought up in a partitioning, just so that those are reviewed by the building inspector or the city manager, so that, there's consistency in process.
Sounds good, sounds good. We can add that to our list. If there's no further questions or comments on this, I'd like to turn to the public. Walter, do you have anything you'd like to say? Not a word. With that, we'll go to the new business number D, discuss an amendment to Chapter 2.7, the zoning section 270-4, gross floor area, to clarify which commercial areas are to be included and excluded in calculating gross floor area. Commissioners Gossett and Gay.
Yeah, well, if this looks somewhat familiar, it'll be because this is a continuation of a discussion that we started with residential gross floor area. Probably the discussion started 2 years ago, and finally, this past March, we adopted code language to define specific areas within residential of what is included and excluded. And the idea at the time was, since that was the ultimate fix. I mean, there was discussion about various ways to get at the issue of defining gross floor area, and the one where we specifically listed elements that are included and excluded ended up being the cleanest way to do it, where takes out the guesswork. So the thought at the time was to do a parallel change, or a parallel, it's actually not a change, it's a clarification, for gross floor area in commercial zones, much the same way we did in residential, where we list the areas that are included and excluded. And so Commissioner Gossett and I met with Matt several times and came up with this list in the way he interprets the code now. And Matt, I will just ask you, did I get the finished height right at 7 feet 6, or is it supposed to be 7 feet in the basements and storage areas as well?
Yes, Commissioner, it's 7 feet 6 as the qualifying for a habitable room in a commercial use.
Okay, so it's only the habitable line that's 7 feet. The other lines are still 6.
Correct.
The storage area in the basements.
Correct.
So I got it right. Okay, thank you. That was the one question I had that I didn't know. And so here it is, and it's obviously got to go, because it's a zoning amendment, it has to go to a public hearing and go through those processes, but this is the draft. You want to add to that?
Just that, thank you, Commissioner. This, again, parallels what we have done with regards to the residential gross floor area, and trying to spell it out specifically so that issues are defined exactly of what is and what is not to be included when determining your gross floor area. This type of code listing, if you will, is very commonly used in other municipalities throughout the United States, so that it is trying to be as clear and concise and unambiguous as possible when doing this. And Mr. Janis, I don't know if you have any further comments as to how you would feel this would be, the implementation of this versus the current system being used. Just, you're the one that does this all the time, or you and your staff. So just some comments, if you will.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I think if you put a list of items into what I'm specifically reviewing, I think it makes my job a heck of a lot easier, for sure. It's always nice to have a list in front of me when I'm looking to see what's included, what's not included, and it's also making that list available to the public as well. By doing this, helps them to design a better building as well.
So, I guess to clarify to begin with, is this your current interpretation and application,
Yes, Commissioner, it is. Yes,
this list?
correct.
This is what you're doing now, you've been doing it for some time?
It is because of the interpretation of the past. This just clarifies it, I think, a little more so. So it is more in line with my interpretation of the code. Yes, sir.
But Matt, that's actually not true, because you were interpreting the code differently than Dom, and Dom interpreting balconies and all the things that Commissioner Gay and Gossett just included this in gross floor area, which we exclude on the residential side. You were interpreting it as not being included in the gross floor area. Dom was, and that's partly how we ended up in the issue.
I think there's some confusion there. So in the commercial aspect, in a commercial use, I have to determine those areas as usable. When it becomes a residential application, those areas of usage don't necessarily count as a floor area ratio. Across the board in a commercial, if you're letting public into it, it's got to be habitable, and it's got to be protected, and it's got to be egressable. It's not the case in residential. So you do get different interpretations from commercial to residential.
Then that's where the confusion came in, because there was an attempt to make them the same, and they were never the same.
Correct.
Totally different use.
Totally.
Totally different
So-
use.
Right, but, and that is important for fire code.
For all codes.
Not building and zoning. And it's one reason why commercial and residential were never different. There was no difference in our code.
That's not true. There's always been a difference. That's not true. I went back and looked at when the Avenue Inn was built, when the Hotel Rehoboth was built, and this is how it was applied.
I also looked at that building permit and all of the exclusions. It was not clear what was included and excluded.
Yeah, you have to do the math. I mean, you have to sit down with it for a couple hours and do the math to come up with that. But,
Well, I disagree.
you know,
I sat there.
but anyway, that's how the confusion happened, is that there was a difference in the way residential was interpreted, and there should be a difference in the way residential was interpreted. So, but I did not see anything, I mean, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, I did not see anything in any records to indicate that it's ever been anything other than this in commercial, right?
As far as my knowledge is,
Right.
right.
Okay, yeah.
Anything else, Commissioner?
But we've got legal issues pending that are related to this subject and what's included or excluded in the GFA, and I don't think it's appropriate.
Well, let's let Glenn address that. Glenn, have you had a legal review, and then is there any conflict with the ongoing court cases?
So I've not done an in-depth review of this. I did get it about a week ago. I just haven't spent a lot of time with it. And I still want to have a conversation with Matt just to make sure that he's interpreting it the way that I think the language or the words are put into the draft ordinance. As far as the pending litigation, Those cases are completely briefed. They're submitted to the court. And remember, they're cases that are on the record, so nothing that happens here should really influence those cases. I always do get a little bit antsy when there's something pending and there's a code change proposed that is related to it, but a judge should not be looking at this draft ordinance because he's making a decision based upon the record that occurred before our Board of Adjustment previously. So this should not have an impact on any decision-making at the court level.
That's good to know. Thank you, Glenn. I appreciate it. I mean, the goal all along was to codify what was actually being done in practice and to clarify. So there aren't really any changes here. That was the goal from the beginning.
And I think this also, in using this listing, if you will, specifically definition, prevents that from different building inspectors, building officials, having different interpretations of what they consider yes or no. Here's a very clear list of what is to be included and what is not to be included. So I think that is, in my opinion, an assisting mechanism not only to the building official, but to, as you mentioned, to the applicant themselves as to, it's very clear, yes, no. It makes it as clear as possible.
Matt, so one question I have, I know that when the commissioners did the residential inclusion and exclusions for gross floor area, the code specifically says in a 1 and 2 family dwelling, here's what's included and what's excluded. This would say then in a commercial use, here's what's included. Is there anything in between 1 and 2 family dwelling and commercial that's not addressed by these two categories?
They would be uses not currently in use in our city. Industrial, manufacturing, something like that, but they still qualify technically as commercial, but when you look at those, and as far as storage is concerned as well, when you look at those, they're kind of broken out on their own separate kind of code. I mean, they're part of commercial code, but again, we don't have those uses here in our city, so I don't think that any of those could be problematic to us.
So where's like a 6-unit condo building? Where does that fit in?
Commercial. So once you eclipse 2 families, you're automatically into the commercial code. And I do want to address Commissioner Chernowski's comments. The 2 codes, well, not only the 2 codes, but all codes across the board when you're speaking in commercial, they all relate to each other. So it's not just a fire code and it's not just a building code. They all interact completely together.
Yeah, I guess I want to think that through because I always think of a condo building with 6 units or whatever as a residential use, and this is talking about a commercial use.
It is a residential use. The trip up is you can't get the use with the zoning. So that's a lot of the trip up happens. We can have a commercial zoning with a residential building use, but it still falls under a commercial because it is over 2 families.
Which is why we had to call the other one 1 and 2 family.
Correct.
Right, yeah.
So Matt, just a couple of questions that kind of occur to me. So like an HVAC system that sits on a roof, is that counted?
As far, counted as what, sir? I'm sorry.
Well, in number 6 here, you've got heating, ventilation, cooling systems. You know, very often in commercial buildings, you know, those are outside on the roof.
So if you're letting the public up there, let's just say we have a rooftop deck, a green roof, something like that. If there's 2 means of egress to that area that is not an elevator, so 2 stair towers, it is accessible to the public and has to be counted. You can have a elevator tower go up. You can have 1 set of stairs go up to that rooftop. That is not a truly accessible area to the public and does not need to be counted.
So that has nothing to do with having an HVAC system there. It's why they're not, the rooftop is
Correct.
it's a usable area by the residents or the public or something. Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Commissioner?
Yeah. In terms of covered parking, so if a commercial building has a small covered parking area, like right outside their front door, you know, where vehicles drive through, temporarily park and so on, and then move on. does that fit this definition of covered parking?
It would. I mean, if it has a roof over it, we've got to count it for something as well. We know that commercial, across the board, you can cover 100% of the lot. It just gets technical then when you throw roofs on structures where we need to count that as far as floor area ratio is concerned.
And an interior courtyard that's fully enclosed means that that the only way in and out of it is through the building. Is that fully enclosed?
The building code does speak to courtyards. Our zoning code does not, but certainly we could take a look at that to see how it would be interpreted. It's still my belief that if it doesn't have a roof over that structure, it shouldn't be counted as floor area ratio.
All right.
So it's only, so fully enclosed and covered, you're saying?
Correct.
Well, it sounds like there's some receptivity. There's maybe a little hesitation by one commissioner. Glenn indicated he'd like more time to look at this. What I'd like to suggest and get feedback on is at our next time we talk about this will be the September workshop. We'll have additional conversation. I know we had Alex Papajohn tried to get on as a member of the public today, but he registered too late. So we should be anticipating something coming from him probably, as well as perhaps others. So if we defer this to the September workshop for additional discussion and feedback, and then we could go to the September regular meeting. At the earliest, consider a resolution to go to public hearing and then conduct a public hearing, again, at the earliest, at the October regular meeting. Is that all right?
Yeah, Mayor, could I just ask one additional question of Matt, since we have him? You said that HVAC systems on the roof are only counted if there's 2 egress. This would include any HVAC system included in the GFA, the way that it's written. Is that correct, Commissioner Gay, Gossett?
When you were talking to us about where you were counting on for egress purposes, right? So
Correct.
So do we need to clarify that, and do we need to clarify about courtyards being covered, fully enclosed and covered?
I think if the goal is to call out specifically what's counted, then absolutely, yes, ma'am.
Okay, but porches, balconies, decks are whether covered or uncovered, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And just add covered under interior courtyard.
Interior courtyards, and on the heating, HVAC, add something about egress. But outdoor showers is in that one too. We may have to move that because that's sort of in a different category.
Yeah, you can have your mechanicals stored on your roof and provide access to maintenance.
Okay.
But as soon as you're letting the public up there, that becomes a space.
Okay, we can clarify that.
Thanks, Matt.
Anything else? Any members of the public? Walter? Nothing on this topic? Thank you very much. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
thank you, Commissioners Gossett and Gay, for sponsoring this. With that, we'll go to the next item, new business E, discuss requirements for public notices, mailings, and signage to be codified, the same for preliminary reviews as is for public hearings for Planning Commission site plan review, minor and major subdivisions, and participate. There's no written report. This will be introduced and sponsored by Ann Womack. You have.
One of the situations that's been occurring is between the site plan reviews, the minor and major subdivisions and partitionings, we have a change in code where public notices are required for the preliminary reviews and public hearings for the partitionings, minor and major subdivisions, but yet with site plan review, they're not. And with the past case that we've had last year into the appeals, it's been a little confusing as to the reasoning why there's no public notices, mailing, signages are required for the site plan review for preliminary.
So what we'd like to do is have Glenn write up something to codify this as it is, to match what we've already got there, but to add that these extra details and present that for possibly a vote at the next meeting. It's a minor write-up, just clarifying what Ann just said. Glenn,
Right,
do you have any?
I think that's right, Mayor. It's just, there's just an inconsistency between what notice requirements are required by the code for site plan reviews versus what's required for partitionings, minor and major subdivisions, and this would just align all of those planning commission activities with the same notice requirements at each stage of the process. So, right, I would say kind of a copy what's being done for the other ones and add it to site plan review.
Right. Any questions from the commissioners?
And just what section of the code is this outlined in?
It's chapter 236, subdivisions.
Thank you.
Anything else, Ann? You got it. Thank you. So we'll put that on our August regular meeting for a review of the first codified version as well as consideration. With that, Walter, nothing. With that, we'll go to the next item of new business, which is F, discuss draft policies for conducting public meetings in person and virtually and additional operational policies. The support document for this is embedded in the agenda. I'm only going to go through part of it. I'd like to get your feedback on it. Most of you know I'm a policy guy. I like things written down so that we can follow things. The main part of this is just on how do we conduct public meetings in the future. If you recall pre-pandemic, you may or may not know, video conferences were not allowed with elected officials, although they were with non-elected officials, video conferences. Virtual meetings were not even contemplated or allowed prior to the pandemic. And all public meetings were held in person other than video conference. Now, post-pandemic, there's a new Senate Bill 94 that sets opportunities for municipalities to conduct public meetings while also establishing one new rule. And what I wanted to do at this point, I believe it's prudent to establish the rules for conducting public meetings for all of our public bodies, meaning our commissions, boards, committees, and task force. My desire is to return to in-person meetings based on my philosophy that, especially that primarily for those groups with specific powers, meaning commissions and boards, they should meet entirely in person, especially during hearings where I believe the parties coming in front of these commissions and boards should be able to see and hear their judges in person. I also prefer for the committees to meet in person, but offer an allowance for some members to participate virtually. And then thus my draft policies are below. You can see I tried to articulate one set of policies of meeting rules for the mayor and commissioners that we are to attend in person, and anybody coming in front of us needs to attend in person, et cetera. And it allows for the public to attend in person, but also new post-pandemic, it allows people to participate from home, provided they register in advance per the instructions in the agenda. The other is meetings of the Planning Commission, Board of Adjustment, Parks and Shade Tree Commission, meetings of committees and task force. And then I have a special category there for meetings of committees or task force with greater than 12 members. That right at this moment is specific to the Wilmington, Baltimore Avenue Streetscape Task Force. That's because it has 16 members. And my goal, besides having us meet in person, is that they're also all the members are visible on the camera and have a microphone in front of them and are able to be seen, live streamed or recorded. And that's not possible in for instance, in this room or any setup that we have to accommodate more than 12 people. So that I think hopefully will be short-lived and we'll be able to add cameras and microphones in the near future and accommodate everybody in person again in the future. As far as the meetings of the Planning Commission, Board of Adjustment, Parks and Shade Tree Commission, I have talked with all of the chairs there, and they are on board with my philosophy of conducting in-person meetings. So this is something I thought would have more oomph if we voted on it at a future meeting. And so I'm offering that as is today for feedback. Also, I wanted to offer additional policies. I'll go through them real quickly. That new policy would be no emails or texts are to be sent or received during the meeting to avoid noncompliance with the Freedom of Information Act. This is a thing that Ann's been big on and I've been big on for years, and it's time to implement it. There are problems with receiving and sending texts during meetings. Our view and FOIA's view is that during public meetings, any and everything that happens up here at this table is to be shared with the public. And by receiving text and sending text, that's not possible. Also, I'll give you an example that if we're conducting a public hearing, by example, on a permit of compliance, and we call an end to that public hearing, that means that those members of the public that are here can no longer speak up, and those members that are registered to speak can no longer speak up because we have closed the public hearing. But then we also need to disallow that opportunity where people at home or people in the public are continuing to email us or text us during the meeting after the public hearing is closed, and that just can't be. So that's the genesis of that. Pre-registering of the public to speak remotely shall include a list of agenda topics they want to speak to. That's more logistics between the city secretary and myself. So that we don't have to ask every member that's registered to speak, what do you want to speak to? What do you want to speak to? We're going to ask ahead of time and try to ascertain that the best we can. The duration of the committee meetings, I talked with Sharon about this. She would like to retain that 1 hour time limit the best that we can. And one way to do that, I believe, is for the committees to continue advising the mayor and commissioners' proposed agenda topics before including them in the agendas. Give us that chance to say a month ahead of time, for instance, that yes, we want you to do that, and no, we don't, or here's some feedback, or here's extra questions we have for you. But in particular, that if we're not interested in a topic, then the committee's not wasting time or committee staff time on them. Some of the other topics are provided advance awareness of presentations. That's primarily for members of the public that if they're going to have us present something, we need to have notice ahead of time. We can't just receive their thumb drive at the meeting. We need to receive it ahead of time. I'd also like us to all be cognizant of city staff time required to attend meetings. Maybe we can address their topic at the beginning of the meeting to allow them to return to work instead of putting them at the end. I, just as an FYI, I want to restore Planning Commission, Board of Adjustment, and Parks and Shade Tree Commission written reports for embedment into the agendas. We've gotten away from that, and I thought they were very valuable. Just to give a little quick summary of those meetings and what happened. Continue to notify the city manager and the mayor of any desire to contact outside agencies before doing so, especially as a courtesy to the city manager. You all know this, but I'm going to repeat it. When asked by the chair to identify committee reports on the mayor and commissioner's agenda, please advise whenever the report will likely generate discussion and thus need more specificity on the agenda. You know that if it's just going to be a simple report and there's likely not going to be any feedback from the commissioners, then we just accept it as it is. But if you got a special topic that we want to talk about plastic straws or something during the meeting and respond to it, then we should articulate that in the agenda. And then I want to let you know that I'm going to institute individual dedicated email addresses for certain specified committees and task force. I've already done that for the Wilmington, Baltimore Streetscape task force, Excuse me, and what that is embedded into the website. There is a specific address to your committee or task force, so that it relieves Ann some of the burden. Now, she receives all the emails for Planning Commission, Board of Adjustment, because she has to log all that information, keep a log on it. But we want to ease some of her burden, and instead, those emails that go, by example, to the Wilmington, Baltimore Task Force email address, they automatically get sent to her and to the chair, which is myself, and then the onus is on me to forward them or act on them, and that will be the same for each of you as chair of the Animal Issues Committee or something. If somebody writes to you all using that dedicated email address and asks for you to distribute this to the rest of your members, then that would be on you to do. And if you're going to respond, you would do the same thing. So that's just a new program I want to do to help Ann out, but I think it'll make it easier for everybody to email the chair of each committee. Are there any questions or comments?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I want to go back to 1 hour for all meetings. Did I misunderstand?
That's something.
I know a good reason for the Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
You know, because that put a lot of stress on the staff.
It's 1 hour, Commissioner, for a Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
When it's not a Zoom meeting and when it's an in-person meeting, it's not 1 hour.
Gotcha. Okay, and that,
Okay. well,
Okay, so there's no time limit. I thought you were going to go to an hour and a half.
I think as long as there's not a staff person in the room, and we can do it externally, then it can be longer.
yeah, okay, thank you. It takes a while to get roll call and get things going, and then you have to stop to reschedule the next meeting. But if we could do 90 minutes or maybe even 120 minutes, but probably 90 minutes would be, I rarely go over that.
I would say definitely hold it down to 2 hours if you can.
Sure.
It gets rather long, but I think the point is we all need to be cognizant of the duration of our meetings, you know.
Yeah, plus
Because even though staff is not in the room, we still have Max Hamby in the IT department running the meeting. So we still have staff, and we have Ann Womack that's either in the room or down monitoring it. So there's still staff time to be considerate of.
You don't see them, but they're there.
Yeah, there. Any further comment? If not, thank you very much. Our next item of new business is to receive updates on and discuss stormwater management planning and health issues. I want to thank Kevin and Evan Miller in advance for preparing a presentation. This is something that's been long in the making to give us specifically introduction to any of these topics, and then updates on the topics, and then the future of the topics.
Sure.
Go ahead, Evan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, members of the public, for having us here today to do an update on and discuss some of the stormwater management, planning, and lake health issues that are ongoing. So just a quick overview of the agenda for today. I'm going to start off talking about the Resilient Communities Partnership. Which I think some of you might.
Y'all are working on the TV?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Which is a project that was actually completed in early 2020, so I'll just provide an overview of that project. I think some of you may recall that. We'll then go into the stormwater utility feasibility study that is currently ongoing, Lake Gerard and Silver Lake, water quality sampling, cleaning and inspection program that's also ongoing, and then current outfall repairs and other projects. So to start off, again, with the Resilient Communities Partnership Project, you'll recall in 2018, I actually became aware of this opportunity, which is administered by the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control. At the time, you know, our communities were facing and continue to face more frequent drainage issues, and this was a good opportunity to address some of those. And the drainage issues come from coastal storms. You can see the image to the left at the top, which is one of our streets department trucks headed down Lake Avenue during Winter Storm Jonas in January 2016. But with that, not only coastal storms, but short but heavy rainfall events that we experience, flooding from the ocean and the bays, and then inadequate infrastructure. So just infrastructure that was built a long time ago to handle a certain amount of stormwater, and now with redevelopment, new development, that infrastructure is now inadequate. And then again, growth, which has also led to an increase in the impervious surface that we've seen within our communities, all coastal communities here in Sussex County, and again, from redevelopment and new development. So on the bottom there, you can see an image to the left of a property located in Rehoboth Beach. That photo was taken in 2012. You can see a pervious driveway. And then in 2019, redevelopment, it is now an impervious driveway. So perfect example about how some of that redevelopment has led to some of the flooding issues that we see in stormwater concerns. So a little bit about the Resilient Communities Partnership. It's, again, a DENREC program that's administered by the Coastal Programs Office. It leverages federal funding from NOAA to help communities undertake the necessary planning to become more resilient to coastal hazards. It is a technical assistance grant, which means that we don't receive any physical dollars, but instead we receive assistance from private consultants and also organizations, departments like DENREC. The Delaware Coastal Programs Office, again, provides the direct staffing, technical support, the public outreach, and the training to support those resiliency efforts. And we had worked with Bob Scarborough and Kelly Valensik on this project. In 2016 and 17, they worked with Slaughter Beach and the city of Newcastle. They had actually worked on a vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan for those two communities. And then in 2019, they worked with the city of Rehoboth Beach and other coastal communities. This is an overview of the partners that we worked with, the municipal partners. The asterisks indicate the original municipalities that we intended to work with. And then through discussions with the Association of Coastal Towns and other town managers, mayors, council members, we actually thought that it would benefit all of the coastal communities in Sussex County, so it was expanded. There were also additional partners and stakeholders. So again, the funding was provided by NOAA, administered by the Department of Commerce. We received the direct project assistance from DENREC, their Delaware Coastal Programs Office, and the Office for Coastal Management. And then we had also worked a little bit with the Surface Water Discharges section. They came in and provided a presentation to the group. We were able to work, the technical assistance was actually provided by AECOM and KCI Technologies, both private firms working in the area. And we also received some assistance from the University of Delaware, specifically their Department of Geography. And then there were also some additional stakeholders, being the Delaware Center for the Inland Bays and Save Our Lakes Alliance 3. So the project really had three components. The first was a Coastal Delaware Best Management Practices Guide that was completed by AECOM. The second was a Delaware Coastal Communities Impervious Surface Coverage Report. That was the component that was done by the University of Delaware Department of Geography. And that took information provided by the state of Delaware and the Chesapeake Conservancy. And then the final was the development of a Coastal Community Toolkit, which was completed by KCI Technologies. So to touch on each of those components, the first component, the Best Management Practices Guide, it highlighted 12 best management practices, including several characteristics like their benefits, the property type in which they could be instituted on, some of the feasibility and maintenance of instituting them, the relative cost, and the level of maintenance for that best management practice. And then also discussed a little bit of the implementation strategies, whether or not it should be more of a regulatory approach or an incentive-based approach. So these, again, are the 12 best management practices that are highlighted within the report. The second deliverable for the project was the Delaware Coastal Communities Impervious Surface Coverage Report. Two main objectives was to assess the accuracy of the impervious GIS layers that were done in 2007 and in 2016 for the Delaware communities, and then also determine that change in impervious surface coverage that we've seen from 2007 to 2016. And again, the data sources were taken from the state of Delaware, as well as the Chesapeake Conservancy land cover data set. So the assessment results on average, they found that the beach town's impervious surface area was 32% of the town area in 2007 and had increased 3% to 35% by 2016. And again, you know, a 3% increase in impervious surface coverage within that 10-year period, roughly 10-year period. And that the private designated areas within the towns revealed a 2% increase in comparison to total town area. And then the final deliverable from this project was the Coastal Community Toolkit. This was completed by KCI Technologies. It identified the best management practices that AECom selected and considered them within each context of the municipalities. And again, determining, you know, if they were better instituted on private property or public property or both. It also summarized the coastal community unique challenges. Those challenges could be code requirements, community size, the organization of the community, and then also some of the geographical challenges within each. And then some of the current initiatives as well. And then they also completed a coastal community ordinance matrix, which just looked at definitions within our codes, some of the regulatory approaches, things like that, that are currently included in each municipality's code, and compared those against other municipalities. They discussed briefly some implementation recommendations and next steps, and then finally, and most importantly, some funding opportunities that the municipalities could go after to institute some of those best management practices. So that was everything I had on the Resilient Communities Partnership. All of these final reports, these 3 final reports, are available on the city's website under Government and then Completed City Projects. You'll see basically a paragraph overview of the RCP project and then all 3 final reports if anybody's interested in looking at those.
Thank you. Thank you, Evan. How do you want us to approach? Do you want to entertain questions at the end of each section? Or do you want us to wait to the end?
That's fine, yeah,
Each
questions after
section? On this chart here, it's got I, P, PU, and R.
Yep.
What are those different?
So the I would recommend, or would be an incentive-based approach, where we're either, for example, offering a credit or maybe some cost-sharing opportunities to institute those best management practices. And then the R would be a regulatory approach, which is something we'd require by our code. The P would mean it's beneficial or could be instituted on public property or better instituted on public property. And then the PU would be on public.
Yeah, so P is
Property.
private. and
P is
PU
private, I'm
is
sorry,
public.
yes, yes.
Okay, right, that's what I thought, okay.
And it was a little bit difficult because, I mean, a lot of the best management practices could be instituted on either one. This chart here is just an excerpt from that toolkit. And again, they had each community complete that spreadsheet, and they sort of just summarized all of them there for you.
So we can go in there and see what the other municipalities
Yep.
have doing or plan to do.
Yeah, and in that report too, there is, I mean, results from surveys. There's a lot of results broken out by how each municipality responded, again, to some of the best management practices, to some of the ordinances, you know, unique challenges, current initiatives, things like that. It details all the responses from the communities in there.
All right. Any questions on this topic? Commissioner Legree?
Evan, would you repeat where that can be found on the city website for all
Sure.
the people that are watching?
Absolutely. So on the homepage, we have the government tab at the top right. If you highlight or run your mouse over the government tab and go down to completed city projects, you click on that. I think it's actually the first icon is the Resilient Communities Partnership. And there you'll see a paragraph summarizing the partnership or the program itself, and then links to all 3 final reports.
And we can access all these reports, the
Yep.
ones impervious surfaces.
Yep.
Great.
Any other questions for Evan?
Well, just one, when, are you talking about the, maybe some of this is on some of the reports that are on the website, but do they give examples of of what the incentives would be?
They do, yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
within that report, like, as I mentioned before, so some of the incentives would be, I know, speaking specifically for Rehoboth, SOLA 3, I think at one point, or they still do offer sort of like a grant to homeowners to institute some of the best management practices.
Yep.
So that is, for example, a current initiative that the city of Rehoboth Beach is working with SOLA 3. Solar 3 offers that up to the property owners. So that's just one example, and I think they include some other examples that maybe isn't exactly administered by a nonprofit, but just might be initiatives that are
And
currently.
then there are incentives listed for some of the other communities as well,
Correct.
so we can get
Yep.
some ideas from that. Okay, thank you, that's great.
Go ahead. Thank you.
As a follow-on to the RCP, we wanted to start looking at what would happen to the city of Rehoboth Beach if we became regulated under the MS4 permitting. And you may recall last year, even a little before that, we were pretty confident, or there were some thoughts going around that we would be regulated under the MS4 permit under the next go-round of cities and towns that were targeted. We passed that test without being named to the regulated list, but a lot of other southern Delaware communities were. I think they added 7 or 8 in the state that are now in the phase 1 of the stormwater regulation MS4 permits. So our philosophy has always been that we want to do what would be required under the MS4 permit without being regulated. So our idea is, do what we would need to do without being told to do it. So one of the things we wanted to come up with was a dedicated funding stream in order to do some of these stormwater projects that we had on the books or that we know they wanted to do. So this past year in the budget, we put in a budget amount to do the feasibility study. Evan was fortunate enough to find us some grant money for that. So we started that pre-COVID. So we were just kind of kicking it off. COVID hit. It kind of lay dormant for a while and then got reactivated 6 or 8 months ago. And we have a consultant on board who's helping gather some of the data. But the key thing for us was it's building on what the RCP did, because several of the things that we need under the feasibility study would be especially the GIS layer that just got done for the RCP, which is extremely valuable and would have cost us a lot of money to go do that separate to that. And then they also gave us that list of best practices so we can see, we can then tailor our program or our utility toward however we want to set it up based upon some of these other recommendations in the study, or how other communities are doing it and how they're managing their program. So we're kind of to that point now. Here's some of the other communities that we know have stormwater utilities and kind of an estimated amount that you can kind of get in a ballpark for kind of where we're thinking this would typically go for us as well. The key is that, we get a lot of stakeholder coordination on this because we need to set it up how the community wants to set it up. You're going to do a flat fee, like Lewis does. You're going to base it on impervious area. Now that we've got the GIS data to do that, do we want to offer incentive to homeowners if they put in rain barrels? Do we give them a credit off the fee? All those kind of things that are options to us under this feasibility study, or when we establish it as a utility. So those are the things that will need that stakeholder input, as well as, obviously the commission. But kind of just to run down where we are in the step, we got, as I mentioned, Evan got the DENREC grant. With the consultant, we've worked through kind of our 5-year CIP, what projects we see on the horizon, stormwater related. We've worked through kind of our operational budget, what it costs us to do the things that we want to do within the stormwater arena. We've got the impervious area work done. So we're ready to now engage with kind of a stakeholder team to then, put the dot the I's and cross the T's on how we want to move forward with implementing the project, get recommendations on how we want to move forward with implementing it. Do we want to do it based on impervious area? Do we just want to do it residential, commercial, what have you? All those little details that would then go into it. But we've got the data collected now, and I think as soon as we get out of the summer season and have some time to kind of put that group together and then start outreaching to them to find out how exactly we want to put the program together. I think, any questions on the feasibility study?
Let me just make a note here. The presentation embedded in the agenda that some people may be looking at is a little different than you've updated this one here, I believe. And that was handed out this morning to us. So we will get the updated one embedded into the agenda later this week.
Sure.
But Any questions on
Yeah.
Commissioner
Could-
Legree?
Could you explain to the public what MS4 is and who has to, do we have to have coordination, not just with stakeholders, but with DNREC before we press on with our stormwater utility?
So the MS4 is the Municipal Storm Sewer something.
System.
There are
Just
four
storm
S's.
sewer
System, right. And that's the system, that's the permit you get if you're going to be regulated by DNREC. So the state would come in and say, you're X size, or we're going to draw the cut line. However we select communities to be regulated under that permit, then that's the permit they issue, and you have to set up your certain goals in order to meet, to be in compliance with those permit requirements.
But because we are not,
We're free to do what we want to do without someone telling us what to do. So,
or coordinating with anyone besides stakeholders.
sure, absolutely.
Okay, that's great.
You mentioned, I'm sorry, stakeholders, DNREC, DelDOT, any others?
Certainly SOLA 3 would be on that list. You know, they're so involved with the lakes here, those types of folks.
Any private citizen involvement?
Yes, yeah, and we would want to have private citizens, we would want to have nonprofits, we would want to have DelDOT. Are we going to, you know, put a fee on the DelDOT for their piece of Rehoboth Beach? So all those kind of things are options that other communities do or don't do, so we'll kind of work through that with, you know, all those stakeholders to get their input.
Well, that was going to be my question, is here, this jumping off point, ready to engage stakeholders, which is going to be the key to the whole thing, of getting it finalized. Are you envisioning a task force? Are you envisioning something similar to the Utility Rates Committee that would work for a certain amount of time to define this? How is that going to?
Yeah, I would leave that to the city manager and the mayor to decide how we want to put that team together. I'm just pointing out that we're ready to do that now that we got the data collected.
Yeah, it's. I think it's
So
good to
once
have
we
it.
get out of kind of the busy summer season, we'll figure out how that group would meet.
And I think we also need further input from the commissioner, so we'll
Okay.
get that as time goes on.
Okay, and what sort of time frame are you looking at, or are you looking at a time frame?
I would guess I would estimate from establishment of the stakeholder group, it'll take better part of a year by the time we come back with recommendations, you know, put something before the
So
board
then
to approve.
You don't necessarily see this going into being part of the budget for the next budget cycle, but the one after
Yeah, I
that, probably.
wouldn't foresee that.
Okay. Well, one sort of a more general question I had was that, you know, both in the CDP in 2010 and in the update in 2015, I think certainly it'll be in the 22 one as well, was the need for an overall stormwater management plan. And I recognize the fact that we've got various things in the CIP, and there was also a number of recommendations that were made by GHD back in 2016. But I guess I wonder, is going to be an overarching plan for stormwater management over and beyond what's listed on the CIP? And if so, would that not need to come first certainly before the fee structure is finalized?
I don't necessarily agree. I think we have enough information with, you know, the report that GHD did. They gave us a really good outline as, you know, what we have on the books. We have a pretty well-established, you know, 5-year CIP with projects we've identified that we know we want to do. I don't know that we would need to do, you know, another study before we
Okay,
would
that's
then
fine.
do this. I think we could move forward with this, and if we wanted to move forward with
But those two
kind of
things,
an asset management report for the stormwater side, then we could do that separately, I think.
but the GHD, so you're still using that? You're still using their
yes.
recommendations, and that feeds into the CIP? And I guess I'm just sort of wondering if there's one place where all that stuff would come together, would be listed, at least for the stakeholder group that's going to be looking at it. You know?
Yeah, right now it's not in one
Right.
tight little group. It's several
Right.
things we pull together and kind of look at
Yeah,
at budget time.
right, okay.
I think I'm hearing that we're not going to be able to budget for certainly 2022 and perhaps not for 2023. When are we going to be able to start using those funds?
I don't think we could rush it and get something in time before the budget preparation for our FY23. I think that would be tough. Could we do it? Probably yes, but it would be very tough. So I think we take that next period of time, we start looking at budget year FY '24 as when we would, assuming we come to a recommendation of here's when we start collecting those fees in
So-
FY '24.
So when we're talking about the Basin 40 and all the assessment and repair projects, which amount to over $2 million, I think it's going to have to come out of our hide, or how are we going to, what's the plan on that? Are we going to,
Right now,
or are we going to stretch it out maybe? I don't know.
We could do some of that as well. Obviously, we have projects we'll talk about in a little while
Okay.
that are in the current budget, like Basin 40. So we got the authorization this year to go through with the design, so we can get the design finished. Whether we go through with an execution and a construction project over the next few years, I mean, that'll be decided, when we go to the budget process this year.
Kevin, we're not delaying any urgent needs. It's either in our capital improvement budget or it's in our operating budget, but we're taking care of things that are urgent, correct?
Correct. Right. We would not hold on any urgent project waiting for the utility to be in place. I mean, right now, we're funding it out of the general fund. We just thought, because we know we have some big ticket capital items on the long-range plan that we want to do, that we ought to start building that bank.
But I think my thrust, Commissioner Chernowski, was that the enterprise fund is going to be a tremendous advantage once we get that set up and going.
I don't disagree at all.
Well, and we've been working toward that for 3 years. So I think by the end of this, then we'll have certainly a plan in place,
Yes, we have.
and been doing other catch-up items.
Thank you.
Okay, I think next up is lake management.
All right, I will be quick. I only have 2 slides. So switching gears a little bit from stormwater utility to talk about actually where some of our stormwater goes, which is into both of our lakes. Mainly since Lake Gerard is city-owned and city-controlled for the majority of the shoreline, it is much easier for us to have an effective change on that. So if everybody can remember back to 2005, a little more than 15 years ago, we undertook this major restoration of Lake Gerard, and I borrowed this top photo from Envirotech, who was involved in the process, as well as NOAA, DENREC, SOLA 3, and the city, and I may be leaving 1 or 2 entities out of that, so I apologize. And obviously this was met with some resistance from people. You get used to something being a certain way, feeding the ducks and geese, and having it mowed right down to the water. It can be a little disconcerting for the change, but we can fast forward and, in my opinion, and to be truthful, I worked for Envirotech from 2007 to 2010, so we were actively maintaining it then. I can say that the buffer and the water look better than they looked when I worked there, and we just had them do the summer mow for the buffer, and the wildflowers were outstanding this year. And with those native wildflowers also comes all the wildlife that go along with it. And part of that restoration, we created that buffer. We did subsurface aeration, so the diffusers that if you look really hard, you can see bubbling. And then also a ton of native plantings, both right along the biolog and then also in the buffer. A few years ago, I want to say 6, we did at the tiny park on Silver Lane. The city owns a portion of the coastline of Silver Lake there, and that's the bottom photo. We did a conservation landscape plan and a living shoreline with the biolog and plantings, and that also established itself really well. Ton of native wildflowers. Lake Avenue Phase 2, part of the design for that, for the actual streetscape, everybody can see that we had the bioretention basin put in. So part of the point of that, incorporating some green infrastructure into the parks, where it's really the simplest and easiest, especially when we're doing projects like this. So there's an overflow on that basin, so it can hold X amount of stormwater. And then once it reaches a certain height, say we get 3 inches of rain in, I'll have the calculations wrong, 3 inches of rain in 8 hours, it'll hit that overflow device and then bypass the basin so it doesn't flood out into the road. But the basin itself will do both quantity control, right? So it has a storage capacity for Lake Gerard, but also quality. So the plants and the media there is going to filter some of the pollutants and sediments that come in, because we also did a couple of curb cut inlets. So if you look on the parking across from the Breakers Hotel, you'll see the tiny little depressions in the curb. So some of the water that runs off from the street and the sidewalk can go into those curb cuts and is funneled directly into the basin. Now, before, it would go directly into the grate and then right into Lake Gerard. So it's a definite improvement over what we had. The Silver Lake Management Plan, they're going to talk about in a couple more slides, I believe, Evan. The Lake Gerard Accretion Project. So originally we spoke about that in 2017. I think the first presentation was to the mayor and commissioners, if not a little before. It is currently in the CIP for the fiscal year 2023. And what that involves is basically scooping all the sediment out of that prong that's near the Italian garden and the swing set, and letting it dewater in bags so it all drain out, sedimental dry, and get some of that weight out, and then hauling it all away. Now, at the time in 2017, I believe the price was around $50,000. That did not include the disposal of the sediment. So that was kind of an unknown because it's based on quantity and weight. And that also did not include the repair of the pipe that goes directly into that finger of Lake Gerard. And then if we wanted to bring it up to how Kevin's talking about MS4, part of the standard would be to have a 4-bay. So a little bit of riprap so that if we have future sediment deposits, they're in that 4-bay and we can scoop that out rather than the whole of Lake Gerard. So I would look to see that price increase significantly going forward 6-7 years, and then also the disposal costs and the pipe cost. And then we also have a couple of additional city ordinances that Matt is going to speak to in a few slides that directly affect the lakes regarding building and stormwater. And then my only other slide is about shoreline protection. So we've seen an increase in residential, basically bulkheads, especially along Silver Lake. And they are not the preferred method. This comes directly from DENREC's website. They have a great section if you look it up. But the difference between a living shoreline, which they sometimes call soft or green, and then a riprap or a bulkhead, which is harder gray. Basically, the bulkhead completely disconnects the land from the water. So you get very little wildlife, very little plants. And then oddly enough, the very reason you put it in to stabilize the embankment, sometimes, a lot of the time, you end up with pockets of erosion right behind that. And then what happens without that natural movement of the soil and sand, you can actually have it deflect the wave energy, and it can create erosion downstream. So if there are bulkheads on private property and then it creates erosion, it could be doing that down in our park where we don't have bulkheads and we have the core logs and native plantings. So it's important that when we have some private and public control, like that they're all similarly managed, and that creates the problem on Silver Lake since we only own a fraction of it. And that being said, the bulkheads and something like the seawall, it has its place. So where we have strong wave energy and we need a hard shoreline protection, nobody can argue with the effectiveness of the seawall down there on at the end of the boardwalk. So knowing when to institute one versus the other is very important. And that is it for me.
Let's go back to that previous one there. Do we need to codify anything with respect to the types so that it's easier on you all to recommend or force people to do one thing over the other?
Well, we would love not to have to force people to do anything, right? We would love to have education be the prime thing, and I don't know that we've really done that too well, quite frankly, on this. I'm not saying regulation wouldn't be part of the solution, and I think probably when Evan talks about the management plan, they'll have some better suggestions. And like I said, the retaining walls do have their place. They're great for recreation. So if you need a kayak launch or something like that, it's much more difficult to do it with the living shoreline. And really the city can set the examples, right? So where we have some shoreline erosion, we should be doing the living shorelines and not bulkheads, which we have stayed away from for the most part. Something like the canal dock, that's different because we have the recreational component, and probably if you ask the engineer, there would have been no way to have that slope natural. It was too steep, and we have potentially too much wave action if boats don't follow the rules in the canal. But I mean, that simple diagram really does show it all. And as I said, on Denrick's website, they have a ton of more information, much more in depth than this.
If you go back to the previous slide also, forgive me if I missed something, but I just wanted to review in my mind the accretion project. My recollection is we originally were scheduled to do the accretion project at some point, and then the Lake Avenue Phase 2 project came up, and we said, okay, well, we want to do Lake Avenue Phase 2 prior to the accretion project. And then actually Commissioner Legree, I think, at a budget meeting brought up that he does not want to see the accretion project before filters were put in.
Yeah, before the lake management.
So we backpedaled on that. Are we making any progress on filters and things before pursuing the accretion project?
I know that your recollection is correct, that we pushed it because of Lake Avenue Phase 2, and that makes perfect sense. I am not aware of the status of any filters. I don't know if Kevin knows anything. That's
Because that was, I think that was the point where we withdrew the money from the budget to be able to do that.
Well,
Yeah.
SOLA
Go
3
ahead.
also
Go ahead, Ed.
recommended that we not proceed without having a comprehensive plan.
Yeah, and that's in my mind, that's still a viable caution. I would love to see us coordinate that with DENREC about the advisability of dredging a small area of the lake. We haven't done core samples. It's just a lot of things that have to be done before we do that. But the first thing is to stop the erosion coming into the lake, stop the flow of hard, fast water coming into the lake. And that's why we recommended the filtering and slowing down the water and everything. And go ahead. I'll move on to Silver Lake.
Finish.
Okay. There's a lot of controversial discussion that we had here on Silver Lake. And it's a very active lake, and it's because of the prevalent winds. And the biologs that were placed in 2010 washed away within a short period of time because the activity of the lake kept overflowing the biologs. And it ruined them and washed them away, and much of them ended up around my dock. And that all had to be taken out and cleaned up and everything. And that portion, this is anecdotal, that portion of the lake continues to have the most severe bank erosion of the entire lake, except where we've put riprap in, which, by the way, is all overgrown with plants and everything now. And it really, it's a great shore, in spite of what Mr. Chacon said in 2012, I believe. But yeah, so I'm still on board the same as, except now it's with SOLA 3, I agree with them. So.
Well, and it's interesting, if you go back and look, if you have Google Earth on your computer and you have 10 minutes that you want to dedicate to this, if you go back and look at the time lapse, looking over that finger of Lake Girard, you can see how it fills in over the years.
Indeed, indeed it has.
It's not just my memory or oh yeah, it used to be, perfect evidence right there that over, I mean, I think it goes back pretty easily. You can see it into the 90s, I want to say. And I mean, it used to be more open.
Yeah,
but
no problem.
I can even remember when I was working on the lake that was always the section where the east wind would blow everything to that tiny little corner of the lake. So every sediment, every piece of pollen, every drop of algae all went and collected over there. So every plant seed that would grow along the rest of the lake. So it doesn't surprise me that it's filled in over the years like that.
And there's a lot of biomass that comes in because we don't regulate the shoreline. We have
Well.
private property all along the north side. None of that's regulated. The trees grow down and garbage falls in and it contributes to this silting of the lake. But we need to ask folks who know what's going on, what you do to a lake when you dredge a portion of it. What do you do to the rest of the lake? The trauma.
Dredging, yeah, it's a positive and a negative. It's not something that people agree on. Usually dredging is coupled with a recreational component, like to put in a dock or something. You don't see it as a standalone a lot. In this case, I think it would be partially aesthetics, but a big portion would be restoring our water storage capacity. So the more water Lake Gerard can hold, the better quality that water will be when it goes out into the ocean.
Speaking of quality, we have a history. DNREC does grab sampling and have done grab sampling of the Grenoble Place outflow for many years. And that continues to be the cleanest and most pristine collection of any of the outfalls in Rehoboth Beach. Which brings up another thing. When are we going to start measuring the quality of water in Silver Lake? I'm waiting for that day. Thanks, Liz.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you. Sharon, you?
I was just going to say that we're, dealing with a couple issues that we need to address before we can bring something forward to the commissioners regarding the continuation of the accretion project.
Right, very good. Thank you, Liz. If there's no more questions, we're gonna pass you over to Evan.
Yep, thank you again, Mayor. So as Liz sort of indicated in a previous slide, we are currently underway with a lakes management plan for Silver Lake and Lake Comegys. So you'll see two images there of where Silver Lake is and then the small Lake Comegys just to the south. So just a brief overview about the Lakes Management Plan, how we got to where we are today. So around 2018, we were actually contacted directly by the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control, and we were made aware of the Surface Water Matching Planning Grant. And we were actually sort of encouraged by DNREC to apply for that program specifically for developing a lakes management plan. This has been something that's been not only on the city's radar, but on DNREC's radar for quite some time. So we were contacted directly by them and asked to go ahead and apply for that project, which we were certainly willing to do. We had a pretty quick turnaround time on that grant by the time we became aware of it, and the due date, I think it was like 3 days. So I had immediately worked with Envirotech, knowing that they have worked with the city before on particular lakes projects, and the fact that they have done similar plans in the past. So I'd worked with Todd Frischman with Envirotech to develop that application, and also received some letters of support from SOLA 3, as well as Dewey Beach and Sussex County. So we have partnered on this project with Dewey Beach and Sussex County because we all have interest in Silver Lake and Lake Comegys. So it is a 50-50 grant. Rehoboth, Dewey, and Sussex County all put up $16,667, which makes up the $50,000 match for the surface water grant. DNREC then provides that match at $50,000. In 2019, Kevin and I were talking and started to discuss the possibility of working with the Army Corps of Engineers. They provide a planning assistance to states program, Section 22, which was actually instituted by the Water Resources Development Act, and that provides direct funding to local governments and states to develop comprehensive plans for conservation of water and land resources. So we thought it was a perfect opportunity to work with a federal partner, people with significant knowledge and expertise in this area. And they also had brought a match of $100,000 to this project. So we pursued that. The Army Corps, the Philadelphia District, they are the federal sponsor. And then the non-federal sponsors, again, are Rehoboth Beach, Dewey Beach, and Sussex County on this project. So overall, the concerns that were brought up by the stakeholders or the partners in this project was water levels. During high water levels, basements, we get concerns from residents about basements flooding in homes, and just a lot of, some issues associated with that water being high, and not only at Silver Lake, but Lake Comegys as well. Also with that comes low water. So with the low water, there's a reduction in recreational activities, especially at the northern stretch of Silver Lake. Concerns over just low water leading to mud flats and the inability to use it for recreation. And then again, trying to understand the degree of connection between Silver Lake and Lake Comegys and how that might affect the management of water levels. So we've been in contact with SOLA 3. They've advised us that there is, in fact, a connection between Silver Lake and Lake Comegys. So we plan to investigate that. It's extremely hard to see what's out there now because there's just so much bamboo out there. It's really difficult to see any sort of infrastructure. But to better understand that and just how that connection ultimately affects the water levels of both lakes. Another concern too was jurisdiction. So, I mentioned that the state of Delaware has jurisdiction over Silver Lake. And then there's also jurisdictional boundaries that abut Silver Lake in particular by Rehoboth Beach, Sussex County, and Dewey Beach. So all three have jurisdictional boundaries, and then the state has jurisdiction over the lake itself. There's been, with that, inconsistent management of the stormwater and the shorelines. And there's also been some questions about the lakeward limits of properties that surround the lakes, just sort of being unknown without significant deed research. So we have shoreline management that's not uniform. We've got some encroachment on the lakes, and then just the establishment of invasive species. This generally has been some of the main concerns that have been expressed by the non-federal sponsors on this project. Some of the opportunities that we have with this project would be, again, to coordinate the shoreline management to help protect and improve the shoreline habitat, to establish an appropriate water level that minimizes flooding while also preserving the lake and allowing for recreation, improving the recreational value if we can at all, and then also addressing water quality. In talking to the Corps, one of the main objectives is going to be understanding the infrastructure surrounding the lakes, who has jurisdiction over that infrastructure. There's been discussion about possibly, as a result of this project, instituting some sort of water quality testing plan. How often it should be tested, who tests, things like that. Again, more to be identified through the development of this plan. And then also the jurisdictional boundaries, so better understanding those boundaries, who has control over what. And then two, I think another opportunity, which I hadn't put on this slide, but I had thought about it with Liz's last presentation, is identifying, what may also be able to be instituted from this plan to Lake Girard. So I think that there could be a lot of similarities, findings from this plan that could also be tied to Lake Girard and instituted there. So again, I think I've said a lot of this stuff here, but just to reiterate some of the Lakes Management Plan requirements, again, that's been shared by all the stakeholders and non-federal sponsors, is just developing a plan that assists in managing the lakes across the boundaries, jurisdictional boundaries, identifying that appropriate water level, coordinating that shoreline management and the environmental protection efforts with the property owners, complements but doesn't inhibit DNREC conservation projects, as we talked a little bit about before, actively engaging the beneficiaries and stakeholders, such as the property owners, SOLA 3, and then avoiding impacts to water birds, wildlife, fish habitats, and the seasonal fish spawning. And then finally, most importantly, something that's feasible, uniform, achievable, sustainable, and also protective. So this is just a quick overview of the scope of work that we've identified for this project. We are currently at task 2, which is conducting some of the existing conditions. We've had some delays with a lot of turnover at the core, but we've got a solid team established now. Obviously, COVID has taken place as well, which has tied a lot of people up. But right now, we are identifying the existing conditions. Last week, we actually had 3 members of the core come out on Wednesday, and Kevin and I and Madison all walked around and observed a lot of the issues, concerns that we have. Walked sort of the boundaries of the lakes, took a look at the weir that's established on the east side of Silver Lake, tried to investigate the connection between Silver Lake and Lake Comegys, and overall just provided them the opportunity to do a lot of data collection. They admitted that they had a lot of information. I mean, we've been sending them various reports, articles, any documents that we can find related to the concerns that we've seen and heard about at the lakes. So they admitted that they have a lot of that information, but reading it, and in trying to interpret it and understand it was difficult. But now that they've actually been here and seen it in person, they've got a much better understanding of exactly what's going on. So then after conducting the existing conditions and doing a lot of data collection, they'll move into the hydrology and hydrologic engineering, again, for establishing the water level. They'll develop that water level plan, the development, evaluation, and selection. They'll then prepare a conceptual plan for the water level management, and then move into cost estimating for that concept plan. The next step will be the environmental coordination, where we continue to just do more coordination with DNREC, the other resource agency, municipalities, and public interest group, SOLA 3, and just try to, again, review some of the existing local environmental and stormwater requirements and how they differ amongst the jurisdictions and what can be improved there, especially with BMPs and things like that. There will be a real estate component, so developing a map that shows those jurisdictional boundaries, parcels, and other important features like stormwater infrastructure. They already have a lot of information from the city of Rehoboth Beach on our stormwater infrastructure. We're just now coordinating with Dewey Beach and the county. Again, there was a turnover at Dewey Beach with their town manager, so we've been in contact with him to get some information from him to share with the Corps. We'll then do continued stakeholder coordination. So just reviewing the draft lakes management plan, getting feedback from the stakeholders, and then finally is having the final report. Right now, I think they're targeting the final report to be July of 2022. So again, there's been some delays in the project, mostly with some turnover at the Corps. They've been trying to wrap up a lot of big projects that they have ongoing right now. So that is an overview of the lakes management plan as it stands today. So.
Thank you, Evan. I probably have just more of a comment than a question, but I'm very interested in the water level plan. I know that for a while the water level was up and down because of citizens and property owners there just going up there and removing a board and adding a board. And then, of course, there's a conundrum there because the people up near the finger, the very northern finger, want the water level as high as possible, generally, so they can canoe and boat and everything. And that's a detriment to the people on the opposite side because their basements start to flood, and there's numerous examples of that on Lake Drive as well as Queen Street and everything. There's also a situation, I don't know if I still have pictures or not, but a situation happened many years ago. I haven't seen it happen but a couple times, and that's when the water level is so high, fish swim up the storm drains as far near Queen Street, by example, and will swim up as far and even beyond Norfolk Street. And then they're actually trapped. They don't swim out for some reason. And then they die and they stink, and it's a big mess there. So there's conundrum about, how do you find that optimum water level? Be interesting to see what they come up with. Any other questions for Evan?
Yeah, I have a comment. I think since you've taken away those boards, or since you caused that to, or someone caused that to happen, the lake level stayed fairly constant, and there's probably no swimming up up the stormwater. And I hope the people on the very northwest fingers up there are okay. But the level has you've really stabilized it and done a great job with that. You've kept it low enough so that the waves don't come onto the land. And although there's still a lot of erosion going on actively, but the one thing I want to say, this whole process, please don't isolate the homeowners. They really take care of most of the boundary of Silver Lake that has people taking care of it. If we had to undertake that expense, it would be tremendous. So keep them in the loop, informed. They're pretty smart people, most of us. A few of them aren't, but they're pretty knowledgeable people, so keep them in it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a quick,
No, you go right ahead.
I just have a question about the timing. You mentioned that the target date's now July of 2022, and you said you're at stage 2 now. Is there a schedule for when you might get to things like environmental coordination or the stakeholder coordination or any of that? Is there a time frame for this? Are there periodic updates?
Yeah, they have. So right now they actually have December of 2021 for the environmental coordination. And I imagine too, it'll be a lot of just ongoing communication with the stakeholders. But right now that's sort of a date that they've tentatively put on there. And I'm sure as we progress through those tasks, there will be updates to schedules and things like that, which I can provide updates on.
Are there meetings, or is it mostly just information from going back and forth?
I imagine there are meetings. I don't recall off the top of my head how many they've planned for, but we have had that conversation. I mean, right now we've done a kickoff meeting, which was really just for the stakeholders to talk about the scope, some concerns, and what they plan or hope to get out of the plan. And I expressed to the Corps that I think now that they've been here, they've done a site visit, there's been a turnover, there's a new town manager at Dewey Beach, and we have our new project managers for the Lakes Management Plan. We get our heads back together and take a look at all these things again and discuss things like public meetings and how we plan to engage the public. But that will certainly be a part of it, yeah.
Okay.
Go
One
ahead.
other question. Under opportunities, you said that you thought about it this morning or what have you, about paralleling this with Lake Girard. Has that subject been approached with Army Corps, or how do you see that kind of meshing or what have you?
Sure. So I think probably one of the biggest things is, looking at what we currently have in the code, what the recommendations are in terms of management of the shorelines, protection of the shorelines, and using that information to then look at Lake Girard. How exactly we do that, I'm not quite sure yet, but I'm just thinking that I think there will be some things that come from this plan that are also applicable to Lake Girard.
And then maybe it's task 11 here. Once the report is received, what is the process to interpret and implement the plan?
I mean, I really think it's going to be internally working with the city staff here, mayor and commissioners, but also continued coordination with the other stakeholders, the other jurisdictions to figure out, what the implementation items are. I mean, I think the biggest thing is trying to be consistent across all jurisdictions, and at that time getting together to figure out, what the next steps are. At this time, I don't know that I have a perfect answer for you, but
But there still is a plan for it to have those other jurisdictions involved.
yeah,
And for implementation and
absolutely,
measurement and
Absolutely.
what have you.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Next.
Well, Commissioner, I'm glad to hear you're very happy with the lake level. I now have a suspect in who disabled the weir to
I
such a
know who
point
did
it's non-functional, right? So there is no weir system now. So the water level is low. I hope the people in the western side of the lake are as happy as you, but I don't think they are.
It was folks who had a 24-hour running of their sump pump in their basement,
Sure. Yeah. So it's been permanently
but they're gone. So
disabled. right? They ripped the weir right off. The brackets for the weir are no longer there. So
True.
the only thing that causes the water to back up is if all the
There's a few reeds.
exactly the
Yeah,
kind
and
of
I
the
check that weir maybe every 2 or 3 days just to see how we're doing, and it's great
works great. It's not working, but it works
for
great.
me.
For you. Great. I'm going to touch briefly on the water quality sampling program. You may recall that this became a requirement for us when we were getting the permit from DENREC to do the ocean outfall, that they required us to do stormwater sampling to, I guess, ensure ocean water quality. So we've done that. We did it for however long, 3 or 4 years now. It has been a moving target. I mean, it's hard to kind of track down where the different problems arise. Clearly, our area is focused on kind of the commercial district of Rehoboth. As Commissioner Legree mentioned, water quality at coming out of the lakes into the ocean has been good. It's really confined to Rehoboth Avenue, Maryland, and Delaware, within that kind of group. So we've done a lot of water testing, a lot of stormwater testing and sampling, mainly up Rehoboth Avenue, because you recall, I think we had 2 beach advisories issued last year, which were the kind of the first 2 we'd had in 4 or 5 years, I guess. And so far this year, it's been pretty good. But it's always a concern. Obviously, anytime they issue a beach warning to keep people, or beach advisory to caution you against swimming, obviously not in anybody's best interest. So part of our issues are, large number of birds and gulls and everything else that sit on all those flat roofs, crap all over the place, and then rain washes it down into the stormwater pipe and it goes out into the ocean. We had some earlier issues a couple years ago where we had kind of not maintained that vault down at the end of Rehoboth Avenue as it should have been. So we've got that into the regular maintenance piece now, as well as the sand filters over on Wilmington Avenue, which we believe do serve a function. We actually did testing downstream, before it was cleaned and after it was cleaned. So there is a significant amount that's collecting in that filter, in the sand in that filter. So one of the things we're looking at now, talking with our consultant, getting some advice from them, is the regularity of cleaning that layer of sand off of the top of the Delaware storm filter on Wilmington Avenue, if that makes sense. So that's one of the things we're looking at. The other is, as we chase, the bacteria west on Rehoboth Avenue, you can kind of see a couple of the areas of interest. But the big one that we're kind of focusing in on now is that 2nd Street kind of intersection. We got some hot readings there. Our latest round of sampling was this spring. And we got some hot readings there, high in bacteria. And we think, just anecdotally, it's that it may be coming from that old line that runs up the alleyway behind that first row shop. So that Wilmington Avenue alley or Martin's Lane or whatever the proper name of it is. But there's an old stormwater line that used to have some pumps in there in a big vault down at that really low area. The pumps have been removed, I guess, years ago. And so anyway, we're focusing our effort now kind of in that area, and then some other areas right around that 2nd Street manhole where we got, some of the hot readings. So that's an ongoing issue. We'll continue to chase it down until we can kind of find if in fact there is a sanitary connection somewhere in our stormwater system along Rehoboth Avenue. But it's just a tough thing to track down. I assume when the streetscape was done, we left a lot of stuff in the ground, and some things got connected, maybe some things didn't. But it's a pretty good conglomerate of stuff under the road down there. And as we start videoing and we find these things, we just are constantly trying to chase them down to see what might be getting in there. The other thing that we think has impacted and might have hurt us a little bit last year was with all the outdoor dining now, and the guys are washing down their sidewalks at the end of the evening or first thing in the morning. It's getting more fuel into the stormwater system that would help the bacteria grow if it's in the system already. But we weigh that against the benefits that it provides. The other thing that came out as a result of that water quality sampling that we started several years ago was the need to address via ordinance updates a couple of things along that commercial district with respect to trash and those kind of things. So Matt's going to talk to a little bit of the ordinance issues that we've tried to address over the past couple of years.
Thank you, Kevin. As you can see, we brought a couple ordinances in to directly address water quality. It's a pretty big issue here you've heard the term thrown around quite a bit in today's presentation. First one being the 10-foot no-build buffer, which was brought in 2013 by 27042.1. It is a 10-foot no-build buffer from the ordinary high water mark, which is somewhat problematic to determine. We do, surveyors do that recordation of that line. As you can see from the first example down below, the first one to the bottom left is an infraction of that 10-foot no-build buffer. I'm not going to obviously give addresses or anything like that specifics, but you can see that the 10-foot no-build buffer was definitely encroached upon in that first example. Also, the stormwater management for site disturbance was brought in by ordinance number 102-44.1, added in 2019. The middle picture at the bottom there is also an example of some recent infractions that have occurred directly in relation to that stormwater management. Fats, oils, and greases ordinance, Article 3, Chapter 162, was added in 2021. You can see from a picture there at the top right, we're still getting some stuff. What that stuff is exactly, we don't know, but trash runoff, greases, there's still some stuff being presented into the stormwater system. The ordinance relate directly to on and offshore water quality, obviously, and as you can see from these examples that I've provided, enforcement has definitely become problematic. I won't blame city staff or anything like that. It's just even if we had the appropriate staff on, we still have these occurrences that probably need to be taken a harder study or harder look at.
Harder to look at the standpoint of enforcement, of fines, of opportunities that this shouldn't happen. I'm just curious, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think probably taking a look at these ordinances and building in a little bit more enforcement, maybe a little bit, heavier penalties. I don't necessarily want to say heavier, but more, healthier penalties to prohibit a lot of these occurrences. And one of these occurrences, I won't say which one, but the state actually got involved and came down with 2 different agencies and addressed one of these occurrences. So the state's definitely looking at them a little harder than we are. It may be an opportunity to build some enforcement into it.
And does this state have greater enforcement opportunities or powers than we do, or how does that rank?
Well, I can certainly say from prior experiences, not even working with the city here, when a state agency comes to your property, it's the last thing you want to see. And when it's a simple code official or a building inspector, they don't tend to look at them as the way that as a state agency would come down on them.
And does that impact fines or licensing, or what powers does the state agency have that we as a municipality don't have?
It could be fines. It could be revocation of business licenses. It could be suspension of contractor licenses. It could be a number of things. I know in particular one contractor, anytime they are presented with a project, anytime they apply for a project, they are forced to automatically apply to SCD. Regardless if they meet the requirements or not, that specific contractor needs to report to that agency before any construction can happen.
And those, what you just quoted, are state requirements and not municipal requirements?
We've built some of those. We've recognized some of the state requirements. We brought the stormwater and erosion sediment and erosion control manual into the city. but we haven't addressed all of the issues that all of the state, that the state would look at as well.
And would you suggest incorporating that as part of our ordinances, or?
I believe I would, obviously with a lot of discussion up front here. I think it would do, I think it would go to the greater good of improving offshore water quality and onshore water quality.
And that would certainly improve the health of the beach, and that's why
Absolutely.
everybody comes here, so, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And when the state comes in, is it because you've called them in?
Not necessarily. In this particular instance, we did not notify the state. The state was notified by a third party, and they began enforcement of their own volition, and we were kind of the backing, not necessarily the backing, but a player there too.
Is the relationship positive and supportive of the city and the state in these circumstances?
Yes, absolutely. We all work for the common good, the greater cause. So everyone that I've worked with thus far on these issues has been exemplary.
Good to hear.
Matt, could you say where that photograph on the upper right was taken and when? I don't recognize it. I recognize the other ones, but.
That is a picture taken on Rehoboth Avenue, and it was we'll say it's a recent spill.
Okay. All right, so that goes into the ocean,
Absolutely.
okay? Not through a lake first. I got you, yeah. Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Matt.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
The next thing we just want to touch on is the program that we've instituted a couple years ago with respect to our stormwater system, where we dedicated a healthy amount from our CIP budget to go in and actually do cleaning and inspection of each of our stormwater pipes. This has led us to a lot of amazing finds, if you would, but very interesting as well. Just a shot of, that's kind of our map of where we've been with our stormwater cleaning and inspection program, and then a condition rating, or condition assessment of the pipe that we find there. So obviously, you know, the green is good, yellow is medium, and then red is bad. So that's really helped us identify where we wanted to then go spend our repair money as we develop, you know, next year's budget as to where we're going to go and try to fix some things. But it gives you an idea what the program is. You can see a couple of shots of what we're seeing. You know, things from offset pipes, just muck accumulated in the bottom of the pipe, and then roots are a constant battle for us, both on the stormwater side and the sanitary side. Any questions on the kind of the inspections, what we're getting, sir?
Do you have any kind of feeling about how close you're going to come to the CIP that you had dedicated to the assessment and repairs? Is it turning out to be worse than you thought back in March of 2020, or?
So the first year that we did the program, and I forget what amount we had in at that point, it was a lot worse than I was envisioning. Second year was about what we had envisioned the year before. So it is, I mean, it is what it is. I think we have a pretty good feel for the overall condition, what's causing us problems, and then what are the important things that we need to address. I mean, just because you have some muck in the bottom, you know, you may not have a water quantity issue, but now in that you may have a water quality issue. I mean, that's not stopping flow, right? But it may cause maybe junk in there that may help with bacteria growth or something along those lines. Roots, obviously, that's a water quantity. So all those things that are plugged up with roots aren't draining properly. So I think we're seeing, you know, noticeable improvement in where we're finding short-term ponds developing, you know, in our streets in these areas that we've cleaned, because we've busted a lot of those roots out, and at least it's flowing to that degree. We're going to talk about in the next presentation how we can help move this along even farther with some of that ARPA money.
Kevin, one other question before you move along. Are the cleaning and inspection programs being done by city staff or a contractor?
Contractor.
Contractor, thank you.
So we can probably count on those extending on out past 2026?
Correct. I think on the stormwater side, we're at roughly a third of all of our pipes have been cleaned and inspected. Yeah, so I think it's a valuable program that we're I think we're seeing dividends from it, and then seeing where we want to focus our construction effort on fixing.
Thank you.
Moving on, this past spring, I think we've talked about some damage we had to the stormwater outfalls on Grenoble and Maryland avenues. So this spring, just before Memorial Day, we had a marine contractor come out. We were familiar with them because they actually did our video inspection and repairs to the ocean outfall a year or so ago when we were doing the required videos out there. So anyway, they came out. Just because of the far end of the structures had become unstable, we didn't want to leave, the pipe kind of hanging out there in a precarious position, waiting for another storm, and then rip that and just cause more damage. So we had them come out. They cut the end off, the unsupported ends off of those two pipes. I think 3 feet off of Maryland, and I think 6 feet off of Grenoble. Resecured the existing support structure, tightened all the bolts, put new bolts and washers and nuts on where we had to, and did all of our stormwater outfall. So they're all pretty up and tight right now. We feel pretty comfortable with them. What we'll have to make sure we do is when it comes time for another beach replenishment, we just got to make sure that our elevation of the new pipe, whether or not we need to, extend the pipe back out, or whether we're okay at the existing length now, based upon the elevations of our beach replenishment. So we'll work that, this year, so that, I guess 2 years or a year and a half from now, when we do the beach replenishment again, we'll make sure we're going to be okay with that. But they also recommended that, we kind of institute a kind of an every other year kind of program to go out, check bolts, tighten things, and the like. So we'll figure out how to do that. Any questions or issues on the ocean outfall?
How many total outfalls are 7?
6 or 7? I'm guessing. Yeah, I'm guessing.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a map, I think, in one of these that'll tell us. And just some other projects going to touch on that we've done throughout the last year and a half that are paying us some dividends. Obviously, the stormwater, this was a big CIP project for us 2 years ago, where we did lining for the first time, did all that corrugated metal pipe down Delaware Avenue, and then a portion of Wilmington, and then the sections under the boardwalk, so we didn't have to dig that up. We were able to do that. Lining that went very well for us. Another one that's in this year's CIP project is for the design of this area of town that doesn't have any existing stormwater infrastructure. And then we went through the concept phase last year, and the consultant kind of came up with this recommendation. It's feasible. He's doing the design now. It looks like it would be involvement, a new pipe down 4th Street, and then probably a new pipe down Sussex, which would then take it to our favorite little prong of Lake Girard.
Okay, so this is what's going to make the difference for Lake Girard.
This is what's going to make the difference for that little area of Rehoboth. That now, it collects between the curb and kind of that parking area. It gets pretty full of water. But ultimately, it'll take it. It's really worse at the intersections, I think, is where it really accumulates now, because you've got some dips where it holds that for a while. But anyway, that would help get it off of the street and down to the lake.
And you're still comfortable with the original assessment, which was $1.5 million, I think?
Cost estimate, we haven't re-looked at that yet. We'll get it after we get
All
the
right.
design, and with whatever cost increases we're seeing as a result of the last year or so. But our thought on the timing of it was, we really, in order to get it done off season, we really couldn't take it all on at one time. We would do it in phases, do the connection to the lake first, back up Sussex, and then do that second piece the following year. Some of the other projects, after the force main, we were collecting water all along Henlopen Avenue, so we did a couple of French drains out there that proved very effective. Same kind of thing on 1st Street, had a huge issue down there right around Columbia. Actually put in a new inlet structure there and connected it to the existing storm sewer. There at the bike trail, you can see a picture in the bottom right of what it used to look like right after the bike trail was completed. So we put an inlet there, connected that in. So all those little point projects seem to be paying us dividends. We put a new inlet over on Brooklyn, where it was washing all the way through that those folks' house and tearing up their yard. And then we put a connection. Liz talked to it a little bit on the Lake Gerard stormwater basin. It's it has an overflow basically, so it'll overflow into the drain and then get to the lake. What we were seeing out on Scarborough Avenue, it wasn't draining well at all. So it was it really became a mess out there with a frog pond and algae and everything else. So this year we actually constructed an overflow there. So as it gets full, it'll overflow and go to it'll ultimately go to the lake through a stormwater pipe as opposed to just kind of sitting there and stagnating. So that it seems to be working very well. And I think that's it. Any other questions on anything stormwater related?
Anybody?
He's itching.
Great job.
Very good job, everybody. Liz, Evan, Kevin, thank you very much. Next item of new business is to discuss staff recommendations for use of over $400,000 in American Rescue Plan Act funds received and deposited into the city account. Sharon?
Thank you, Mayor. We have received approximately $414,000 in funding. This fiscal year, we plan to receive the next funding piece, probably not until the next fiscal year. And most of the, well, all the projects related to use of the funding were deferred from last year's capital improvement plan. They are allowable expenses under the guidelines. We've paid attention to all of the detail supplied and recommended, and Kevin will talk to you further about the projects.
Thank you, Sharon. This chart is something we showed, I think, at the last meeting, kind of showed a recommendation on what categories maybe we would recommend spending them on. I think I said a quarter on paving, a quarter on storm, a quarter on sanitary, and then a quarter on water. And Sharon asked us to kind of drill down into more specifics as to what within each of those fields we would really recommend doing. So the two things that weighed most heavily in my mind, one is that it met the requirements of the act, so that it had to be something that was deferred from the previous year, so we were good there. And then the other was our ability to actually execute it and get it done this year. So we wanted to make sure it was something we could do. So street paving, obviously it was an easy one because we already have an annual contract where we bring somebody in to do paving. So our thought there was pick one of the next priority streets that's not going to make the cut this year, but would be high on the list for next year, move that forward. So we have two, Stokely Extended or Scarborough Extended, that we're evaluating now to see which one each one of those would be about $100,000 in our estimate. So right now we're evaluating the underground utilities to see if one of those or the other one makes more sense. If we don't have to do as much work underground, or if there is a lot of underground work to do, then we probably wouldn't want to do it under this program. We would pick the other one. So whichever one makes the most sense for us is we would add that to this year's paving contract and do it under that program. So $100,000 we're recommending to add to the street paving. Second one is another annual contract we do, so it's a very easy add for us. And again, another thing that was deferred from a year ago was our annual water meter replacement contract. We would add $100,000 to this year's contract. Our plan now is the area right behind Big Fish, I think it's Rehoboth Gardens maybe or something, is what our original plan is for this FY. Another $100,000 would get us another 30 plus or minus meter replacements with pits. So we would start down that Eagle Lane or Drive, whatever it is. And if we can get into Bay Harbor, then we'd get some of those as well. But a very easy project to execute. Clearly was deferred, a year ago. We could add to the existing contract that's about to be advertised.
Kevin, on that one, my recollection is we deferred when you were doing North Shores. Is North Shores finished now? Or is there a reason why we're not going back and finishing that?
Right, a good point, Commissioner. We did, in fact, not do some in North Shores, but it was more because they were just very, very complicated and hard because they were built under, or people built things over top of them. So we think we're better off doing those individually in-house and approaching them, 1 or 2 a year, knocking them out, rather than mobilize somebody to go back into North Shores. We like to mobilize the contractor in one general area so he can crank them out in that, like we did last year with Breezewood and whatever the other neighborhood is there. So we're attacking the North Shores ones individually with our in-house guys.
Okay.
Because they're very tricky to do.
Makes sense.
Are these water meters remote read?
Yes, not to a base station remote, but yes, you can drive down the street. It'll be the whole new census, new meter pit, the whole 9 yards. Until we get to that mass where we have enough of those out there that we would then consider going to a base station and having that real-time data on the flow.
How much is it costing us per meter, when we contract it?
So on the last 2 meter contracts, it was about $3,000 to $3,500 for a full meter, pit, new connect, all of that connection back to the meter itself. About between $3,000 and $3,500 for the full thing. Where we're just doing the meter, it's probably around $1,000 to $1,500 in that range. So these are all places where we want full meter, new pits and everything. So we're using about $3,000 to $3,300 as our estimate. So I thought we could get maybe another 30 with an additional 100,000.
Kevin, how old are most of these replacements you're doing?
Most of the meters we've been replacing systematically are in that 25-year range. We went to metered back in the mid-90s, I think, is when we started metering things. So
Is that still a lifespan for the new ones?
they typically we replace them in the 15 to 20-year range. So we're well beyond what we would have expected. Yeah, and I think I have mentioned before, as they age, they slow down. They don't typically speed up. So the sooner we get the older ones out, the better we get it for efficiency on our meter reading and costing out.
Remind me, Kevin, you had talked about there, I know there's certain categories that this money has to be spent in that we talked about before, but you also just said that one of the requirements is it has to have been deferred. Is that a specific requirement?
I think that was in the language, right? It had to be something that you pulled out of your previous budget because
Really?
of
Okay,
COVID-related.
that's a baseline requirement for everything? Okay, I had not realized that because.
So it was it was fairly easy for us because we could go right to specific projects that we had deferred,
Right.
2 years ago.
Right.
But to be clear, it's not a baseline for every project that we do. It's one of the categories that you're allowed to spend the money on. So if you deferred something, you can. But there are other projects that didn't have to be deferred that you can still spend the money on.
Okay, that's a huge distinguishing feature in my opinion. Yeah, okay. I have to say, I'm struggling with this because I fund, this is found money. This is a chance for us to not just spend, but to invest in our future. And I feel like we shouldn't use it for deferred maintenance because all of those things should be factored into the CIP, and worked in on an annual basis. And then we've also talked about the stormwater utility, and, I just heard a little while ago that's not going to happen for a while, and, maybe it should. Maybe that should be on a faster track because we're not using this to replace lost revenue. We didn't have lost revenue during the pandemic. So I feel like rather than spending it on money that we could have spent and didn't spend, that we should be investing it by going beyond what we would normally do into things that we really haven't looked at yet, but take into account some of the best practices from like the Community Resilient Project. I mean, that's what's so great about hearing all this at one time today, is it really sort of spurs that thinking. But for instance, porous paving. I know some of it was done in the City Hall a lot, but it is not a plan for our streets. There are other elements of that project that, where we don't have them in our long-range plan, where perhaps this kind of money would go a long way toward investing in our future rather than just covering some deferred costs. That's a philosophical statement on my part, and that's why I'm torn here. So, I'll just throw that out there. Also, before I finish, let me just ask one other thing. You had mentioned using about a quarter of it, I think, or some portion of it for staff, for essential workers or
Correct.
something? So
Correct.
what's the status of that?
Well, I'm happy to report that the city figured out a way to take care of some of those employees that had been here throughout the day-to-day operation of COVID. So we took care of them in a different way.
Okay,
It didn't look like this was really a good use,
okay.
whether it was specifically prohibited or might just raise too many questions if we did. We did not decide to use this money for that, but she was able to take care of those employees.
Oh, so they have gotten something from. That's great.
Yes, I think we've,
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I was going to ask the same thing. It's really good to hear that.
Yeah.
they're very happy today. We hope.
When you start reading stormwater utility plans and things like that, porous paving comes up quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it's something great to think about and keep it in the, although I'm sure that
I'm very
we
cynical
didn't
about it. If you-
defer that.
If we go out into our parking lot or out into the convention center parking lot and see it, we built
Yeah.
it without having the ability to maintain it. So now it's all plugged and you can see how it's all settled. So I'm not as big a proponent for that as some, but it is a tool in our toolkit should we want to do it. Yeah.
And I would just point out, Commissioner Gay, that, this is a long, continuous process of dealing with, issues in the Department of Public Works that were delayed for many years. So I think we have a process in place now where we're addressing all of those factors, and stepping back and taking money out was a cautious way for us last year during COVID, to look at that and look at that funding. But putting it back is also very important. Although I hear what you're saying, and possibly in the future that we can add that part of the stormwater plan, porous paving and everything else.
Yeah, I guess I just feel like with this, plus the, because it's going to be over 800, and then the proceeds from Kent Street too, I think of that as found money, and what can we do differently with it, to meet our goals.
And invest.
And invest it, yeah,
Invest.
invest it, yeah, right.
I'm just
Anybody
trying to
else?
fix stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to fix stuff.
Anybody else?
I think we should let Kevin finish.
Thank you, Commissioner. The third item I would put some additional money in is kind of our sewer line assessment and rehab. Similar to our stormwater side, the map shows our assessments that we did last year and a half on the sanitary sewer side, and you can see some reds popping up there that we need to address, and just some of the pipe conditions that we saw. But another one that, again, on the sewer side, sanitary side, we're at about 50% of our pipes inspected. Just a side note on this, as we were doing some of these in the commercial district, I mean, we identified several places where how the restaurant or whoever was able to get any passage out their sewer lateral was truly amazing. And you're able to see that as you go by, that their lateral is almost completely clogged, whether it's roots, whether it's grease or whatever. So actually, with a couple of phone calls, you talk to the guy, you show them the picture, they're more than willing to have somebody come in and clear out their lateral. Of course, that sends a big plug of grease down to the plant, but at least it doesn't result in an emergency repair of a sewer line. So another program that's paying us some dividends. And then finally, a quarter, we would recommend going to the stormwater assessments. I said we were 30%. Let's add additional 100,000 to that to get better progress on where we're going with the cleaning and inspection program on our stormwater side. So those are my recommendations.
Very good. Any further questions from the commissioners?
I'm in favor of proceeding with the city's recommendations.
What is the timeline for us making a decision so you can go forward with?
Great question. Commissioner, yeah, I think we would hope to have an answer at the voting meeting. We've already tentatively moved forward on the paving just because that project was out, so we put a block in there as an add alternate if we wanted to. Depending on how quickly we move on the water meters as well, we would probably add alternate item there, because I think that'll go before the next board meeting.
Great, thank you. I'm supportive of this.
The others, the cleaning and inspection, those are kind of on calls, so that there's no real time limit for that.
I think it's a good plan, Kevin, thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. That'll be on the August regular meeting. With that, we go to commissioner announcements and comments. Is there anybody have anything? If not, we'll go to the next item, which is review future meeting dates. August 20th is our regular meeting at 2 o'clock. Any further comment? Ann?
Please be there. Your workshop meeting in September, probably on a holiday.
Yeah, I believe we've already voted on that and settled on,
The Friday before.
September 8th.
no, Wednesday, September 8th. Everybody should have that on our calendars instead of Labor Day on the 6th. I think there was a conflict with somebody on the 7th, where we have our 9 a.m. workshop on Wednesday, September 8th. And with that, we've had citizen comment. If there's no further comments, we're going to adjourn this meeting at 12:55. And what are the logistics for IT? Do we want to wait 10 minutes before we start the next meeting?
We'll have to be able to start another stream.
All righty, so we're going to take a short recess so that IT can reset, and then we'll start our special meeting within 10 minutes, hopefully.